Hello friends, welcome back to another journey into the darkness. Before we begin, if you enjoy these tales from Gotham's shadows, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive, echoing through the night like the call of a bat across moonlit rooftops. Now, close your eyes, breathe deeply, let the world around you fade away. Tonight I invite you into a city that never truly sleeps. A city where gargoyles watch from Gothic towers, where rain falls like tears on blood-stained cobblestones, where the line between sanity and madness is drawn in chalk around a body in a dark alley. This is Gotham City. And in Gotham, there are stories that freeze the blood. Stories whispered in the corridors of Arkham Asylum. Stories that make even hardened detectives look over their shoulders when the streetlights flicker and die. Imagine, if you will, a man whose face was stolen, not by a surgeon's blade, but by his own hand. He cut away his identity, let it rot for a year, then wore it again like a grotesque mask. He walked into the home of the world's greatest detective and took something precious, something irreplaceable, and he did it with a smile that never ends. Picture a secret society that has ruled from the shadows for 200 years. They nest in the walls of the very buildings you thought you knew. They send assassins who cannot die, performers from a circus of horrors, moving through darkness on owl-silent wings. They have watched every generation of Gotham's elite, and they have always been watching you. Consider a man who was murdered as a boy, beaten with a crowbar by a laughing monster, left to die in an explosion that shook the earth. His mentor, his father figure, carried the guilt for years. But death is not always the end in Gotham. Sometimes the dead return. And when they do, they bring with them a rage that burns hotter than any fire, a thirst for vengeance that cannot be quenched, and a question that has no good answer. If you could kill one monster to save 1,000 innocents, would you pull the trigger? Think about a childhood friend, someone who played in your mansion, who knew your secrets, who smiled at your parents' funeral while darkness bloomed in his heart. Decades later, he returns with bandages covering his face and hatred covering his soul. He knows who you are beneath the mask. He has turned everyone you ever fought into weapons aimed at your heart. And his greatest weapon is this. He makes you doubt everyone you've ever trusted. These are not myths. These are not legends passed down through frightened whispers. These are true stories from the chronicles of the Dark Knight. Real cases documented in ink and blood across decades of Gotham's history. Tonight you will walk with Batman through his most twisted investigations. You will stand beside him as he faces horrors that would break ordinary men. You will see how a city's darkness creates both its monsters and its heroes. But here is what you must understand. There is something connecting all of these cases. A pattern hidden in the shadows. A truth about Gotham itself that even Batman took years to discover. In a cave deep beneath the city, there is a pool of liquid that glows like captured moonlight. It can heal any wound. It can bring back the dead. It can grant immortality. And for over a century, someone has been using it. Someone who laughs. Someone who has been playing a game that spans generations. The question is not whether the Joker is immortal. The question is what happens when an immortal monster decides the game is finally over. But we begin not with endings, but with a beginning. We begin with a boy, and a promise, and a symbol born from fear itself. Let us return to where it all started. Let us return to Crime Alley on a night when the rain fell like tears from heaven, and the world changed forever. Gotham City stands like a tombstone against a perpetually grey sky. It is a place where Art Deco architecture reaches toward clouds that never break, where gargoyles perch on every corner like stone sentinels frozen in eternal vigilance, where the fog rolls in from the harbor each evening and refuses to leave until dawn, if dawn comes at all. This is a city built on secrets. Its foundations rest on bedrock older than human memory, stone that has witnessed civilizations rise and fall, that has absorbed the blood of countless forgotten victims, that remembers things the living world has chosen to forget. The buildings lean toward each other across narrow streets, as if sharing whispered conspiracies. Windows reflect not what is, but what might be lurking in the shadows behind you. The streets glisten with rain that falls more often than not, washing nothing clean, only spreading the darkness around like an infection that cannot be cured. Steam rises from grates in the sidewalks, carrying with it the breath of the city's underworld. the sewers and tunnels and forgotten places where things best left unnamed make their homes. At the heart of this Gothic nightmare stands Wayne Manor, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city proper, isolated enough for privacy, close enough to hear Gotham's eternal scream. It is a house of stone and timber, of high ceilings and long shadows, of wealth that spans generations and tragedy that spans just as long. And beneath that manor, carved from living rock, accessible through a grandfather clock that turns on hidden hinges when the hands point to the exact time of a boy's greatest loss, there lies the Batcave. Here, stalactites hang like frozen tears from a ceiling lost in darkness. Here, water drips into pools so still they reflect perfect mirror images of the world above. Here, bats cluster on the cave ceiling, their wings folded, their small hearts beating in rhythm with the pulse of the earth itself. And here, surrounded by computers and crime labs and vehicles designed for urban warfare, a man prepares each night to wage a war that can never truly be won. But before there was the Batcave, before there was the cowl and the cape and the symbol that strikes fear into the hearts of criminals, there was a boy named Bruce Wayne. He was 8 years old when his world ended. It was a warm evening in June, the kind of evening when Gotham almost seems beautiful, when you can almost forget what the city really is beneath its civilized veneer. Thomas Wayne, a physician and philanthropist, took his wife Martha and their son Bruce to the Monarch Theatre to see a film. The boy loved adventure stories, tales of heroes who fought against impossible odds and always emerged victorious. They left through the side exit, a shortcut through an alley that connected to the street where their car waited. The alley was narrow, poorly lit, the kind of place where shadows gathered like mourners at a funeral. It had a name, though few used it. Park Row, the maps said. But everyone in Gotham knew it by another name. Crime Alley. A man stepped from those shadows. His face was desperate, his hands shaking, his eyes wild with the kind of madness that poverty and addiction breeds in Gotham's forgotten corners. He demanded money. He held a gun that looked too large for his trembling hands. Thomas Wayne, always the doctor, always trying to heal, reached slowly for his wallet, speaking in calm, measured tones, trying to de-escalate, trying to save a situation that was already beyond saving. The gun fired twice. The sound echoed off brick walls like thunder trapped in a canyon. Thomas Wayne fell first, then Martha, her pearl necklace breaking as she collapsed, the pearls bouncing and rolling across filthy concrete like drops of frozen moonlight, seeking escape from the horror they had witnessed. Bruce Wayne, 8 years old, watched his parents die. He watched their blood pool on the ground, mixing with rainwater and motor oil and all the other fluids that make up Gotham's circulatory system. He watched the shooter flee, his footsteps fading into the maze of alleys that make up Gotham's dark heart. And in that moment, something inside the boy broke, or perhaps something was born. It is hard to say which. The family butler, Alfred Pennyworth, a former British intelligence agent who had served the Wayne family for decades, became young Bruce's guardian. Alfred was a man of infinite patience and quiet strength, a man who had seen the worst the world could offer during his years of service to the crown, a man who understood that sometimes the only way to survive tragedy is to transform it into purpose. Bruce Wayne made a vow that night, kneeling at his parents' grave as rain fell and thunder rolled across the city. He swore that no child would ever suffer as he had suffered. He swore that no parent would die in some filthy alley while their child watched helplessly. He swore an oath on the graves of Thomas and Martha Wayne that he would wage war on all criminals, on all who would prey upon the innocent, on all who would choose violence over peace. But a vow is not enough. The child's promise, however sincere, is not enough to change a city like Gotham. Bruce Wayne needed to become something more, something that could strike fear into the hearts of a superstitious and cowardly lot, something that could move through shadows as naturally as breathing, something that was more than a man. And so he left Gotham. For years he trained. In the mountains of Tibet, he learned from martial arts masters who could break stone with their hands and catch arrows in flight. In the streets of Paris, he studied criminology with detectives who could read a crime scene the way scholars read ancient texts. In Tokyo, he learned the art of deception and disguise from masters of the theater who could become anyone, anything. In the depths of the Amazonian jungle, he learned to survive with nothing, to adapt to any environment, to push his body beyond what should be humanly possible. He returned to Gotham a changed man. His body was a weapon honed to perfection. His mind was sharper than any blade, trained to see patterns where others saw chaos, to deduce truth from lies, to solve puzzles that left others baffled. But he still needed something more. He needed a symbol. The answer came one night as he sat in his father's study, surrounded by the books and artifacts Thomas Wayne had collected over a lifetime. Bruce was exhausted from his first night attempting to fight crime as a mere man in tactical gear. The criminals had laughed at him. They had not been afraid, and without fear he realized he could not win this war. As if in answer to his unspoken question, a bat crashed through the study window. It flew around the room, its wings creating shadows that seemed to multiply in the lamplight, its small form somehow filling the space with a presence far larger than its size suggested. It perched on the bust of Bruce's father and stared at the young man with eyes that seemed to hold ancient knowledge. Bruce Wayne remembered how bats had frightened him as a child when he fell into the caves beneath the manor. He remembered the fear that had frozen his blood, the primal terror of something emerging from darkness on silent wings, and he understood. Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. They fear what they do not understand. They fear the night and what might lurk within it. Very well, he would become their fear made flesh. He would become a creature of the night. He would become the thing that lurked in shadows and struck without warning. He would become the Bat. Alfred Pennyworth, ever practical, ever supportive, helped him design the suit. Kevlar weave for protection, a cape that could become a glider, boots designed for silence, gloves with reinforced knuckles, a utility belt holding tools for every occasion, and a cowl, black as midnight, with pointed ears that evoked the very creature that had inspired it, with white lenses over the eyes that hid his humanity and suggested something other, something beyond human, something to be feared. The Batcave became his headquarters. The computers analyzed crime patterns. The laboratory developed tools and weapons. The vehicles waited for nights when speed and armor would be required. And every evening as Gotham's respectable citizens locked their doors and prayed for safety, Bruce Wayne would descend into those caves, would don the cowl and cape, and would emerge as something else entirely. He became the Batman, the Dark Knight, the protector Gotham needed, even if it did not yet know to be grateful. And on a rooftop near Gotham's Central Police Headquarters, Commissioner James Gordon, one of the few honest cops in a corrupt department, installed a searchlight with a special lens. When crime overwhelmed the police, when the night grew too dark, when hope seemed lost, they would shine that light into the sky, and emblazoned against the clouds would appear the symbol, a black bat silhouette, wings spread, a summons and a promise. The bat signal, a call to the night's guardian, a warning to those who would do evil, a prayer made of light against the darkness. And the Batman always answered. But what Gordon and the citizens of Gotham did not yet understand was that the darkness of their city ran deeper than any of them imagined. The criminals Bruce Wayne fought in those early nights, the muggers and thieves and mob soldiers, were only the surface. Beneath that surface, Gotham bred something far worse. It bred madness given form. It bred monsters who wore human faces. It bred villains who would test the Batman in ways no martial arts training or detective work could prepare him for. The war had begun, and like all wars, it would be measured not just in victories but in scars, in losses, in the pieces of soul sacrificed on the altar of justice. The first of those monsters was already waiting, already laughing, already planning his debut. He was a man who had fallen into chemicals and emerged as something no longer quite human. A man whose face was locked in a permanent smile. A man who had embraced chaos and madness and murder as a philosophy, as an art form, as a cosmic joke played upon an uncaring universe. The Joker was coming, and nothing would ever be the same. The first year of Batman's crusade was a baptism by fire. He fought mobsters who controlled entire neighborhoods, corrupt politicians who sold justice to the highest bidder, drug dealers who poisoned the youth of Gotham with substances that promised escape, but delivered only slavery. These were dangerous men, violent men, but they were ultimately understandable men. They wanted money, power, control. their motivations made sense within the twisted logic of criminal enterprise. And then came the night when Batman encountered something that defied all logic, all understanding, all sanity itself. It began with a television broadcast that interrupted every channel in Gotham simultaneously. The mayor was giving a speech about economic development when the screen flickered, went black, and then displayed a face that would haunt the city for generations to come. White skin, not painted but chemically bleached to the color of bone. Green hair that seemed to glow with an otherworldly luminescence. Eyes that sparkled with manic energy and intelligence in equal measure. And a smile. Not a normal human smile, but something stretched beyond the limits of flesh. A grotesque, permanent grin carved into a face by chemistry and madness. The figure on the screen introduced himself simply. "Good evening, Gotham. You may call me Joker, and I have a joke for you. What do you get when you cross a city full of smug, self-satisfied citizens with a man who's decided that life itself is the ultimate comedy? You get what you deserve." He held up a playing card, the Joker from a standard deck, purple and green and mocking. "At midnight tonight, someone will die, and they'll die laughing, because I've decided to share my sense of humor with this dreary city. And trust me, my jokes are to die for." The broadcast ended as abruptly as it began. The mayor's face returned to screens across the city, but his words about economic zones and infrastructure seemed suddenly hollow, pointless in the face of what had just occurred. Commissioner Gordon contacted Batman immediately. The searchlight blazed against the clouds, and within minutes the Dark Knight stood on the roof of police headquarters, cape billowing in the wind that always seemed to blow through Gotham's canyons of concrete and steel. "We've got a problem," Gordon said, lighting one of the cigarettes that would eventually kill him, though that death was still decades away. "Every psychiatrist I've consulted says this isn't a typical criminal. The profile doesn't match anything we've seen. No demands for money, no political agenda, just a promise to kill for the sake of killing." Batman's voice emerged from behind the cowl, gravelly and low, the voice of something not quite human. He called himself Joker. "That's significant. Jokers are wild cards. Unpredictable. They can be anything in the deck, fill any role. We need to assume he's capable of anything." At 11:57 p.m., Henry Claridge, a judge known for his harsh sentences against organized crime, was found in his penthouse apartment. He was laughing. His body was convulsing with laughter so violent it seemed his ribs might break from the force. His face was stretched in a rictus grin, identical to the one worn by the man on television. At midnight precisely, as church bells tolled across the city, Judge Claridge's heart gave out. The medical examiner would later report that he had literally laughed himself to death. But it was the judge's face that told the true horror of the story. Even in death, the smile remained, frozen, permanent, a ghastly mockery of joy that would require a closed casket funeral. The pattern continued. Each night at midnight, another victim. A city councilman, a mob accountant, a television news anchor, each one found laughing uncontrollably, each one dying with that terrible smile locked on their face. And each crime scene contained a calling card, literally, the Joker from a playing deck, sometimes spades, sometimes hearts, always mocking. Batman threw himself into the investigation with an intensity that worried Alfred. He barely slept, barely ate, driven by the knowledge that each night brought another death, another victim claimed by this laughing madman. The detective work led him through a labyrinth of false leads and dead ends. The Joker left clues, but they were riddles wrapped in absurdity, jokes with murderous punchlines. The breakthrough came when Batman analyzed the chemical composition of the toxin found in the victim's systems. It was unlike anything in the databases. A neurotoxin that attacked the nervous system, forcing the facial muscles into that horrific grin while simultaneously triggering uncontrollable laughter. The victim would be fully conscious, fully aware, but unable to stop their body's betrayal as they laughed themselves into cardiac arrest. The chemical signature pointed to one location in Gotham with the facilities and materials necessary to create such a compound. The Ace Chemical Processing Plant on the industrial waterfront, a sprawling complex of towers and tanks and pipes that loomed like a mechanical forest against the night sky. Batman arrived to find the place seemingly abandoned. His footsteps echoed on metal catwalks suspended above vats of chemicals that bubbled and steamed, filling the air with acrid fumes even through his cowl's filters. The plant had been closed for months after a workplace accident, or so the official reports claimed. Now it served as the perfect laboratory for a madman. "I was wondering when you'd find me." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, amplified by the plant's old public address system. "The great Batman, Gotham's Dark Knight. I've been reading about you, watching you, and I have to say, I'm disappointed. You're so serious, so grim. Don't you ever laugh?" Batman moved through the shadows, tracking the voice to its source. "Show yourself." "Oh, I will. But first, let me tell you a story. It's funny. Well, I think it's funny. You might find it tragic, but that's the thing about comedy and tragedy, isn't it? They're the same thing from different angles." The Joker stepped into view on a catwalk above the largest chemical vat. In person, he was even more disturbing than on television. The white skin seemed to glow in the dim light. The green hair was wild, uncombed, framing a face that belonged in nightmares. He wore a purple suit, impeccably tailored with a green vest and a flower in his lapel that was almost certainly not just decorative. "There was a man once," the Joker began, pacing back and forth like an actor on a stage, which in his mind he certainly was. A nobody, a nothing. He had dreams of being a comedian, of making people laugh, but the world just wasn't interested in his jokes. His wife was pregnant. Bills piled up. Desperation makes people do stupid things. "Batman, you understand that, don't you?" Batman remained still, analyzing, calculating, looking for an opening. This man, this fool, let himself be talked into a robbery. He wore a stupid costume, a red hood to hide his face, and he led criminals into the Ace chemical plant to rob the playing card company next door. But the Batman showed up. Yes, you were there. Maybe you don't remember. Just another night, just another crime. But for this man, it was the night his whole world ended. The Joker's smile somehow widened, impossibly, as if his face might split in two. He fell, or jumped, or was pushed. Does it matter? He went into the chemicals. The same chemicals that bubble below us right now. And when he surfaced, when he dragged himself out on the other side, he had changed. His skin bleached white, his hair turned green, his lips blood red, and his mind, well, his mind cracked like an egg, and something beautiful oozed out. "You're saying you fell into these chemicals," Batman said, slowly moving closer, "that you were transformed." "Transformed?" The Joker clapped his hands in delight. "Yes, that's exactly the word. I died in those chemicals, Batman, and I was reborn, reborn without fear, without guilt, without all those tedious moral constraints that keep people like you up at night. I saw the truth in those chemicals. Life is a joke, a cosmic, meaningless, absurd joke, and the only sane response is to laugh. You're killing innocent people." "Innocent?" The Joker tilted his head, genuinely puzzled. "There's no such thing. Everyone's guilty of something. Besides, I'm giving them the gift of laughter. Their last moments are filled with joy. That's more than most people get." Batman lunged forward, but the Joker was faster than he appeared. He squeezed the flower on his lapel, and a stream of liquid shot out, sizzling where it hit the catwalk. Acid. Batman dodged, and the pursuit began, a deadly dance through the industrial nightmare of the chemical plant. The fight took them across catwalks, and through processing rooms, past vats of chemicals that could dissolve a human body in seconds. The Joker fought with a manic energy, unpredictable, using weapons that seemed designed more for theatrical value than efficiency. Acid squirting flowers, playing cards with razored edges, a cane that delivered electric shocks, and all the while he laughed, that horrible, unending laugh that echoed through the plant like the sound of sanity dying. Batman finally cornered him near the main reservoir tank, the largest vat in the facility, filled with the same chemicals that had supposedly created the monster he now fought. The Joker stood at the edge, arms spread wide as if preparing to take a bow. "Here's the thing about jokes, Batman. The best ones have a twist ending. You thought you were hunting me, but really, I was auditioning you, seeing if you were worthy of being my audience. And I have to say, I'm impressed. You're perfect. The straight man to my comedian. the order to my chaos, the darkness to my laughter. You're going to Arkham Asylum, Batman said, where you'll get the help you need. Help? The Joker's laugh reached a crescendo. I don't need help. I've never been saner. I've seen the truth, and it's hilarious. But here's the real joke, the one that's going to keep you up at night. I know who you are under that mask. I figured it out. It wasn't even hard. Batman's blood ran cold. If the Joker knew his identity, knew he was Bruce Wayne, then Alfred was in danger. Everyone he'd ever cared about was in danger. The Joker saw the reaction and his grin grew wider still. Oh, that got you, didn't it? But here's the punchline, the twist that makes it all worthwhile. I don't care. I don't want to know. Bruce Wayne, John Smith, whoever you are under there, it doesn't matter, because you're not a person to me. You're an idea. You're the Batman. And the Batman needs the Joker just as much as the Joker needs the Batman. We're going to do this dance forever, you and I, until one of us dies. And maybe not even then. He tipped backward, falling toward the chemical vat, arms spread like wings. Batman lunged, caught his wrist, pulled him back from the edge. The Joker dangled there for a moment, suspended over the churning chemicals, looking up at Batman with something that might have been gratitude or might have been disappointment. See? The Joker said softly. You won't let me die. You won't kill me. That's what makes you the hero. That's what makes this fun. Batman pulled him up, subdued him, bound him with restraints reinforced enough to hold someone with the Joker's unexpected strength. Gordon arrived with police backup, and they transported the Clown Prince of Crime to Arkham Asylum, the psychiatric facility on the outskirts of Gotham that housed the criminally insane. In the back of the police van, the Joker smiled his eternal smile and hummed a tune that might have been a lullaby or might have been a funeral dirge. Batman watched the van disappear into Gotham's perpetual fog and felt something he had not felt since that night in Crime Alley. Fear. Not fear for himself, but fear of what this encounter meant. The Joker was right about one thing. He was unlike any criminal Batman had faced before. There was no reasoning with him, no rehabilitating him, no understanding his madness through logic or psychology. He was chaos incarnate, a force of nature wearing a man's face. And somewhere in the darkness of Batman's mind, a question formed that would haunt him for years to come. Did Gotham create the Joker? Or did the Joker simply reveal what Gotham had always been underneath its civilized surface? Was the madness always there, waiting in those chemicals, waiting in the city's bones, waiting for someone to fall in and emerge transformed? Alfred was waiting when Bruce returned to the cave, as he always was. He said nothing, simply placed a hand on Bruce's shoulder, a gesture of support and understanding that needed no words. Bruce removed the cowl and sat at the cave's computer, pulling up files on Arkham Asylum, on the Joker, on the toxin that had killed 7 people before Batman had stopped its creator. The war on crime had taken a dark turn. It was no longer just about stopping criminals. It was about confronting madness itself, about standing in the face of chaos and refusing to blink. And Bruce Wayne knew with a certainty that settled in his bones like the cold of the cave, that the Joker was right about one more thing. This was only the beginning. Gotham had always been a city divided, not just between rich and poor, between the gleaming towers of the financial district and the crumbling tenements of the East End, but between old power and new ambition. The old power wore expensive suits and made its money through legitimate businesses that were carefully, meticulously separate from the criminal enterprises that actually funded them. The new power wore a cape and cowl and fought from the shadows to reclaim the city's soul. This was the landscape when a killer decided to send a message that would echo through an entire year. It was Halloween night when the first body was found. Johnny Vitti, nephew of Carmine Falcone, the undisputed kingpin of Gotham's organized crime. Johnny was discovered in the Gotham harbor, a single bullet wound to the head, a jack-o'-lantern placed beside his body, and tucked into his pocket, a simple note on cheap paper. It read only one word: holiday. Commissioner Gordon stood on the docks as the body was photographed and documented, watching the sun rise over a city that never truly woke up, just shifted from one kind of nightmare to another. Beside him stood District Attorney Harvey Dent, a man whose square jaw and movie star looks masked a fierce intelligence and an even fiercer determination to clean up Gotham through legal means. and watching from the shadows, invisible to everyone except Gordon, who had learned to sense his presence, was Batman. "This is different," Gordon said, lighting a cigarette with hands that trembled slightly from too much coffee and too little sleep. "The mob doesn't kill family members. It's against their code. And this presentation, leaving the body where it would be found, the pumpkin, the note, this is someone making a statement." Harvey Dent crouched beside the body, careful not to disturb the evidence, his prosecutor's mind already building a case even though they had no suspect. A statement against the Falcone family specifically. Johnny Viti was nobody special, just another soldier in the Romans' army, but he was blood. This killer is saying that nobody is safe, not even family. From the shadows, Batman's voice emerged like gravel grinding. The note said holiday, not happy Halloween, just holiday. This wasn't about Halloween specifically, it was about the date itself, marking a calendar. Gordon turned to where the voice had come from, addressing the darkness because the Batman rarely stepped fully into light. "You think there'll be more?" "I'm certain of it." And Batman was right. Thanksgiving arrived, and with it came another body. Milos Grappa, one of the Irish mobsters who had been trying to muscle in on Falcone territory, found in his restaurant with a bullet wound identical to the first victim, a turkey placed on the table in front of his cooling corpse, and another note, holiday. The pattern became clear, and with each holiday, the body count grew. Christmas brought not one but two victims, as if the killer was feeling generous with the season. New Year's Eve, another death, another holiday calling card. The Romans' organization was being systematically dismantled, one holiday at a time, one bullet at a time. Carmine Falcone was a man who had survived in Gotham's underworld for decades through a combination of intelligence, brutality, and an almost supernatural ability to stay one step ahead of the law. He was called the Roman because he ruled Gotham like an emperor, from his estate that overlooked the city like Caesar surveying his domain. But even emperors can be afraid when an invisible enemy picks off their soldiers one by one. Batman, Gordon, and Harvey Dent formed an unlikely alliance. They met in secret, in Gordon's office with the blinds drawn, or on rooftops where only the gargoyles could hear their planning. The press began calling them Gotham's Three Knights, heroes standing against the tide of violence that threatened to drown the city. "We need to think about who benefits from the Falcone family falling apart," Harvey said during one of these meetings, his tie loosened, his perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it too many times. "Moroni's family is the obvious choice. Sal Moroni has wanted the Romans' territory for years. Or maybe it's someone from outside, someone wanting to take advantage of the chaos." Batman had spent the nights between holidays investigating every angle. He had infiltrated mob meetings disguised as hired muscle. He had traced financial records through dummy corporations and offshore accounts. He had analyzed the ballistics reports on the bullets, all fired from the same gun, a .22 caliber pistol, the kind of weapon that was untraceable, common, easy to dispose of. And he had studied the psychology of the killer, trying to understand what kind of mind picks holidays as murder dates. "It's personal," Batman finally said. "The killer has a connection to Falcone. This isn't business. It's revenge dressed up as business." As winter turned to spring, the holidays kept coming, and so did the bodies. Valentine's Day brought a murder at a wedding, the bride and groom finding death instead of their reception. Patrick's Day claimed a victim outside an Irish pub, the green beer inside mixing symbolically with the red blood outside. Easter Sunday saw another Falcone soldier dead, found in a church, a twisted mockery of resurrection. But while Batman and Gordon hunted for holiday, they failed to see the other transformation happening right in front of them. Harvey Dent was unraveling. The pressure of the case, the weight of trying to use law and order to fight an enemy who respected neither, the constant threat of violence, it was all taking its toll. Harvey's temper grew shorter, his methods became more aggressive. His wife Gilda watched helplessly as the man she loved disappeared into an obsession with catching Holiday, with proving that the law could work, that justice could prevail without masks and vigilantism. "Sometimes I think you care more about this case than you care about us," Gilda said one night, her voice soft but carrying the weight of months of neglect, of dinners eaten alone, of an empty bed more nights than not. Harvey looked up from the case files spread across their dining room table, his eyes bloodshot, his face gaunt. This is about us. About making Gotham safe for us. For everyone. When Holiday is caught, when the mob is broken, we can have a normal life. I promise. But promises in Gotham have a way of turning into lies. Not through malice, but through the city's own dark alchemy. The trial that would change everything came in late spring. Batman and Gordon had finally gathered enough evidence to bring Sal Maroni to court on racketeering charges. It wasn't Holiday, but it was something, a chance to strike a blow against organized crime through legitimate legal channels. Harvey Dent prosecuted with a passion that bordered on zealotry, presenting evidence with the fervor of a man who needed this win more than he needed air. Sal Maroni sat at the defense table, a man who had killed dozens, maybe hundreds, who had built an empire on suffering and fear, who now faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. And Sal Maroni, like any cornered animal, was dangerous. The prosecution was going well. Harvey was methodical, brilliant, unstoppable. The jury was clearly swayed. Conviction seemed certain. And then, during a recess, Maroni made his move. He had smuggled acid into the courtroom. Not a weapon anyone checks for. Not in a high-security trial with metal detectors and armed guards. Just a glass vial hidden in a place where even the most thorough search wouldn't find it. Brought in by a guard on Maroni's payroll, passed to him during a moment of carefully orchestrated distraction. As Harvey approached the defense table to present another piece of evidence, Maroni stood, smiled, and threw the acid directly into the district attorney's face. The scream that tore from Harvey Dent echoed through the courtroom, through the courthouse, through Gotham itself. Bailiffs tackled Maroni. Paramedics rushed forward, but nothing could undo what had been done in that single moment of violence. Harvey's face was destroyed, not just scarred but transformed. The left side of his face, the side that had taken the full force of the acid, was a ruin of melted tissue, exposed muscle, damaged bone. The handsome profile that had smiled from campaign posters and news broadcasts was gone, replaced by a horror that would make children cry and adults look away in pity and disgust. But the physical damage was nothing compared to the psychological break that followed. In the hospital, sedated and bandaged, Harvey Dent died, and something else was born. The man who had believed so fervently in law and order, in the goodness of the system, in the power of justice. That man had been betrayed by the very system he championed. The acid that destroyed his face also burned away his faith, his hope, his sanity. When the bandages came off and Harvey saw his reflection for the first time, saw the duality of his face, perfect on one side and monstrous on the other, something in his mind split along the same line. He became convinced that the world itself was split between good and evil, order and chaos, justice and crime. And since his face now embodied that duality, perhaps he should embrace it rather than fight it. He found a silver dollar coin, one that had been his lucky charm since childhood. With careful precision, he scarred one side of the coin with acid, creating the same split that defined his face, and he began to let the coin decide. Scarred side he would do evil, clean side he would do good, 50-50 chance, perfect balance, perfect duality. Two-Face was born. Meanwhile, Holiday continued to kill. Memorial Day, another body. Mother's Day before that. The investigation had lost Harvey Dent, but gained a new suspect. Two-Face, in his twisted new morality, had access to all of Harvey's knowledge about the case. Could Harvey have been Holiday all along, killing mobsters as a vigilante while pretending to hunt himself as a prosecutor? The psychology was twisted enough to fit. Batman didn't believe it. He had worked with Harvey Dent, had trusted him as much as Bruce Wayne trusted anyone outside of Alfred. But doubt is a poison, and once it enters the mind, it spreads. The truth, when it finally emerged, was more complicated than anyone had imagined. Batman traced Holiday to a warehouse on the waterfront, the same waterfront where Johnny Vitti had been found so many months ago. Inside, he found Alberto Falcone, the Roman's son, the one everyone thought was weak, incompetent, unworthy of his father's empire. Alberto stood among evidence of his crimes, trophies from each kill, the gun that had fired every bullet. "I did it for respect," he said, his voice carrying the pain of a lifetime of disappointment. "My father never thought I was strong enough, never thought I could be a real Falcone, so I became Holiday. I tore down his empire to prove I could build my own. But even as Batman apprehended Alberto, even as the holiday killings seemingly ended, there was a nagging sense that something didn't fit. The psychological profile was wrong. The early kills had a different quality than the later ones. And when detectives finally interviewed Gilda Dent, Harvey's wife, the full truth emerged in her confession. She had been the first holiday. She had killed Johnny Vitti on Halloween, trying to help her husband by eliminating the mobsters who threatened him. She had killed on Thanksgiving and Christmas, driven by love and desperation to help Harvey succeed in his mission to clean up Gotham. But then Alberto Falcone found the gun she had hidden, discovered what she was doing, and decided to continue the killing spree for his own purposes. 2 killers, 2 motives, 1 name. Holiday had been a shared identity, a symbol that different people wore for different reasons. And in the end, Gotham lost its White Knight, gained 2 more villains, and proved once again that the city corrupts everything it touches. Batman stood on a rooftop months after the last holiday killing, watching the sun set over Gotham. Gordon joined him, looking older, more tired, the case having aged him years in the span of months. "We lost Harvey," Gordon said simply. "One of the good ones, maybe the best of us. We lost him the moment we asked him to fight Gotham's darkness using only the light of the law." Batman replied, "This city demands more. It demands everything, and it takes everything in return. Then what do we do? How do we fight this?" Batman's cape moved in the wind, making him seem larger than life, more than human, a symbol rather than a man. "We keep fighting. We accept that we can't save everyone. We mourn the ones we lose, and we make sure their fall means something." Below them, Gotham stirred in the twilight. Somewhere in Arkham Asylum, Two-Face flipped his coin, trying to decide whether to eat dinner or throw it at the wall. Somewhere in a cell, Alberto Falcone plotted his eventual escape. Somewhere in a cemetery, Gilda Dent laid flowers on an empty grave, mourning a husband who was still alive but lost forever. The long Halloween had ended, but the scars it left, on people and on the city itself, would never fully heal. They would serve as a reminder that in Gotham, even justice can be twisted into something dark. Even the purest intentions can be corrupted. Even the heroes can fall. And the Batman, watching over his wounded city, knew that more falls were coming, more trials, more losses. The question was not whether he could prevent them, but whether he could continue to stand after each one knocked him down. The answer, as it always was, came down to a simple choice: give up or keep fighting. Surrender to Gotham's darkness or continue to be the light that refuses to die. Batman chose to fight. He always chose to fight, even when fighting meant losing pieces of himself, losing people he cared about, losing the hope that Gotham could ever truly be saved. Because someone had to stand in the darkness. Someone had to refuse to let the monsters win. Someone had to be the symbol that told the city's victims that they were not forgotten, not abandoned, not alone in the night. That someone was Batman, and he would keep his vigil no matter the cost, until either Gotham was saved or he had nothing left to give. The city didn't deserve him, but that had never been the point. Some nights in Gotham are quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you nervous because you know it won't last. The kind of quiet that feels like the city is holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. This was one of those nights. Arkham Asylum sits on the edge of Gotham like a tombstone marking where the city's sanity ends. Behind its walls, the criminally insane wait in cells that are never quite secure enough, plot escapes that are never quite impossible enough, and dream dreams that should never see daylight. On this particular night, one of those dreams became reality. The Joker escaped, again. But this time was different. This time, he had a plan that went beyond robbery or murder, or even his usual chaos for chaos' sake. This time, the Clown Prince of Crime wanted to prove a point, to demonstrate a philosophy he had developed during his long hours in his cell. And to prove this point, he needed a test subject. Someone strong, someone moral, someone who represented everything opposite to what the Joker believed about human nature. He chose Commissioner James Gordon. Batman received the alert from Arkham at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, he was standing in the Joker's empty cell, analyzing the escape route, reading the clues left behind like a twisted trail of breadcrumbs. The Joker wanted to be followed. He always did. The game was no fun if Batman didn't play. But while Batman investigated, the Joker was already making his move. Barbara Gordon, the commissioner's daughter, was home alone in her apartment. She was young, brilliant, athletic, and had recently taken up her own form of vigilantism as Batgirl. Though her father didn't know about this double life, she was researching a case on her computer, lost in thought when she heard the doorbell ring. Looking through the peephole, she saw what appeared to be a flower delivery man. Strange for this time of night, but Gotham was strange, and perhaps her father had sent something. She opened the door with the chain still attached, ready to accept the delivery through the gap. The Joker's fist smashed through the wood beside her face. The chain snapped like thread, and before Barbara could react, before she could defend herself with the combat training Batman had given her, before she could do anything but gasp in shock, the Joker raised a gun and fired. The bullet tore through Barbara's spine at the lower lumbar region. She collapsed instantly, feeling her legs go numb, feeling something fundamental break inside her body, and as she lay there, unable to move, staring up at the grinning face of Gotham's worst nightmare, the Joker aimed a camera at her and began taking photographs. "Smile for the camera, sweetie," he said, his voice carrying that manic cheerfulness that made every word sound like a punchline to a joke. Only he understood. "You're going to be famous. Well, parts of you will be." He took dozens of photos. Barbara bleeding, Barbara crying, Barbara in pain and helpless and terrified. Each flash of the camera felt like another violation, another theft of dignity. And then he simply left, leaving her there on the floor of her apartment, leaving her to drag herself to the phone and call for help, leaving her alive because death would have been too merciful for what he had planned. Commissioner Gordon arrived home to find his daughter being loaded into an ambulance, conscious but in shock, unable to feel anything below her waist. The doctors would later confirm what Gordon already knew in his heart. The bullet had severed her spinal cord. Barbara Gordon would never walk again. And before Gordon could even process this horror, before he could ride with his daughter to the hospital, before he could do anything a father should do in such a moment, a van pulled up. Men in grotesque clown masks emerged. They grabbed Gordon, threw a bag over his head, and dragged him into the darkness. When the bag was removed, Gordon found himself in an abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of Gotham. The kind of place that had been cheerful once, bright with lights and laughter, but now stood as a monument to decay. Rides that hadn't moved in decades creaked in the wind. Cotton candy machines were rusted silent. The funhouse mirrors reflected only darkness. And standing in the center of this graveyard of joy was the Joker, arms spread wide, welcoming Gordon to what he called the greatest show on earth. "Welcome, Commissioner," the Joker said, bowing theatrically. "You're probably wondering why I've brought you here. Well, I have a thesis, a theory about human nature, and you're going to help me prove it." Gordon was stripped of his clothing, left in only his underwear to add humiliation to trauma. He was placed on a rickety roller coaster, strapped in, and sent through a tunnel of horrors. Along the walls were projected the photographs the Joker had taken. Barbara bleeding, Barbara suffering, Barbara helpless. Over and over, huge and unavoidable, forcing Gordon to witness his daughter's pain, to live through her violation again and again. And through speakers, the Joker's voice echoed. "You see, Commissioner, I believe that all it takes is one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. That's how far the world is from where I am. Just one bad day. You had a good life, a good career, a family you loved. But one bad day, one terrible moment, and all of that crumbles. You'll go insane, just like me. And when you do, you'll prove my point. That deep down, everyone is as ugly as me. They just need the right push." The roller coaster continued through the tunnel of nightmares. Gordon's mind reeled, not just from the images but from the implication. His daughter was paralyzed. His daughter might die from her injuries, and this laughing monster wanted him to break, to surrender his sanity, to prove that morality and order were just illusions that crumble under pressure. But James Gordon was not a man who broke easily. He had served Gotham for decades, had seen horrors that would drive most men to drink or despair or both. He had faced down mobsters and killers and corrupt politicians, and he had stood beside Batman, had learned from the Dark Knight that sometimes the only way to fight darkness is to refuse to let it consume you. When the roller coaster finally stopped, When Gordon was dragged out and thrown into a cage like an animal, the Joker came to inspect his handiwork. He expected to find a gibbering wreck, a broken man who had surrendered to madness. Instead, he found James Gordon, battered and traumatized but still whole, still sane, still fundamentally himself. "Do it by the book," Gordon said, his voice hoarse but steady. "When you catch him, Batman, do it by the book. Show him that our way works, that sanity prevails, that the law matters even when monsters try to prove it doesn't." The Joker's smile faltered for just a moment. His entire philosophy, his justification for every murder and atrocity, was based on the belief that everyone was one bad day away from becoming him, and here was living proof that he was wrong, that strength existed, that morality could survive even the worst trauma. But before the Joker could respond, before he could adjust his experiment or try a different approach, a shadow fell across the amusement park. Batman had arrived. The Dark Knight had torn through Gotham following every lead, every clue, driven by the knowledge that Gordon was in danger and that Barbara was in the hospital fighting for her life. He had tracked the Joker here through a combination of detective work and an understanding of the Joker's twisted mind, knowing that the Clown Prince would choose a location with theatrical value. The fight that followed was brutal. Batman's rage at what had been done to Barbara, his fury at Gordon's torture, it all came pouring out in every punch, every kick, every strike. The Joker fought back with his usual unpredictable style, laughing even as he bled, treating the violence as just another form of performance art. They crashed through the decaying amusement park, through the Hall of Mirrors where Batman's reflection multiplied into an army of Dark Knights, through the carousel where painted horses watched with dead eyes, through the tunnel of love where romance had long since died. Finally, Batman had the Joker cornered in the funhouse, in a room where the floor tilted and the walls closed in and nothing was quite what it seemed. The Joker was beaten, bloodied, but still smiling that eternal smile. "You know what's funny?" the Joker said, coughing blood. "We're not so different, you and I. We both had one bad day that changed everything. You had your parents murdered. I had my accident with the chemicals. We both went a little crazy. The only difference is you dress yours up in a moral code, and I embrace the chaos." "We're nothing alike," Batman said, his voice cold as the grave. "Oh, but we are. We're both obsessed, both driven by that one moment that broke us. I wanted to prove to Gordon, to you, to everyone, that nobody's normal, that sanity is just a pretense we all keep up until the pressure gets too great. I wanted to prove that one bad day can destroy anyone." Batman looked at the broken clown before him and felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel: pity. Not for what the Joker was, but for what he might have been before that night in the chemical plant, before the madness took hold. "Gordon proved you wrong," Batman said. "He survived the worst day of his life and stayed sane, stayed good. Your philosophy is as broken as you are." The Joker laughed, but it was a different laugh now, quieter, almost sad. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I am wrong, but here's the thing, Batman. Even if I'm wrong, even if Gordon proved that people can survive their bad days, it doesn't change what I am. I can't go back. I can't be who I was before. The joke's been told, the punchline's been delivered, and neither of us can undo it." Then the Joker did something unexpected. He told Batman a joke. A real joke. Not a murder or a scheme. Just a simple joke about two lunatics trying to escape from an asylum. One jumps across a gap between buildings. The other is too scared, so the first offers to shine a flashlight across the gap, so the second can walk across the beam of light. But the second refuses. He says, "You think I'm crazy, you'll just turn it off when I'm halfway across." For a moment, just a moment, both Batman and the Joker stood there in the rain that had begun to fall, and they both saw the absurdity of their situation. Two men trapped in their roles, unable to escape, unable to cross the gap between them, both prisoners of that one bad day that had defined their entire existence. Some say Batman laughed at the joke. Some say he didn't. The rain washed away whatever sound might have emerged, and in the chaos that followed, the Joker was apprehended and returned to Arkham. Barbara Gordon survived. She would never walk again, but she refused to let the Joker's bullet end her contribution to Gotham's protection. She became Oracle, the information specialist who would provide intelligence to Batman and other heroes. proving that disability could not diminish her value or her strength. In some ways, she became more important than she had ever been as Batgirl. Commissioner Gordon returned to duty, carrying the scars of his ordeal but refusing to let them define him. He had looked into the abyss of madness and walked away unchanged, proving that the human spirit could endure even the cruelest tests. And Batman stood on a rooftop watching the rain fall on Gotham, thinking about bad days and how people respond to them. The Joker was wrong about one thing. People didn't all break the same way. Some broke and became monsters. Some broke and became heroes. And some, like Gordon, bent but never broke at all. But the Joker was right about something too. That one bad day in Crime Alley had defined Bruce Wayne's entire life. It had created Batman. And in creating Batman, it had created the need for Batman, the endless war against crime that would consume every night for the rest of his life. The question Batman couldn't answer, the question that haunted him as the rain soaked through his cape, was this: if he could go back to that night in Crime Alley, if he could prevent his parents' murder and erase that one bad day, would he? Would he give up being Batman if it meant his parents lived? He didn't know, and that uncertainty, that inability to answer a question that should have been simple, told him something about himself he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Maybe he and the Joker were more alike than he wanted to admit. Maybe they were both defined by trauma, shaped by loss, prisoners of the past. The difference was that Batman channeled his pain into protecting others, while the Joker spread his suffering like a disease. That difference, Batman told himself, mattered. It had to matter, because if it didn't, if the outcome was the only thing that separated hero from villain, then what was the point of the symbol? What was the point of the mission? Alfred was waiting in the cave when Bruce returned, as he always was. He had already heard about Barbara, about Gordon, about everything that had happened. He said nothing, just handed Bruce a towel and a cup of tea, small gestures of normalcy in a night that had been anything but normal. "Will Miss Barbara recover?" Alfred asked quietly. "Physically, yes. She's strong, stronger than the Joker knew. And Commissioner Gordon, the same. He proved something tonight, Alfred. He proved that goodness can survive anything, that sanity isn't as fragile as the Joker thinks." Alfred nodded, relief evident on his weathered face. Then he looked at Bruce with eyes that had seen too much pain in service to the Wayne family. "And you, Master Bruce, what did tonight prove to you?" Bruce was quiet for a long moment, staring at the cave's waterfall, watching the water cascade endlessly down. It proved that the fight is worth it, that the monsters don't always win, and that maybe, just maybe, Gotham has a chance, as long as people like Gordon refuse to break. But even as he said the words, even as he tried to believe them, Bruce Wayne couldn't shake the image of the Joker's face as he told that joke about the two lunatics and the flashlight beam. Two beings trapped on opposite sides of a gap, unable to trust each other enough to cross, unable to escape their mutual prison. The city slept outside, unaware of how close it had come to losing one of its best defenders. Tomorrow would bring new crimes, new villains, new battles. But tonight Batman allowed himself a moment of rest, knowing that Barbara Gordon would rise from her tragedy stronger than before, that James Gordon would continue to be the moral center of Gotham's law enforcement, and that the war against darkness would continue. Because that's what heroes did. They continued, they persisted, they refused to let the bad days win, even when those bad days created them in the first place. There are some villains who want money, some who want power, some who want chaos. And then there are the villains who want something far more personal. They want to break you, not kill you because death is too quick, too merciful. They want to destroy everything you are, and make you watch as it all crumbles. Bane was that kind of villain. He came from a place called Santa Prisca, a Caribbean island nation, where the prisons were so brutal that merely surviving them was considered an achievement. Bane was born in that prison, serving a life sentence for crimes his father had committed. From the moment he took his first breath, he was a prisoner. He grew up in darkness, surrounded by the worst criminals humanity had to offer, learning survival skills before he learned to walk properly. But Bane was not like other prisoners. He had a mind that was brilliant, strategic, capable of learning languages and philosophies and combat techniques just from watching and listening. He turned the prison into his university, and every inmate into either a teacher or a victim. By the time he was a young man, he ruled the prison absolutely. The guards feared him, the prisoners worshipped him, and the government decided he was too dangerous to simply contain. They needed to test a new drug, a super steroid called Venom, that enhanced strength and endurance, but came with terrible side effects, addiction and death being the most common. They chose Bane as their test subject, not caring if he lived or died. They pumped the green liquid into his veins through a series of tubes connected directly to his brainstem, making him dependent on regular doses just to stay alive. The drug should have killed him. It killed every other test subject. But Bane's will was too strong, his determination too fierce. He not only survived, he thrived. The venom enhanced his already formidable intelligence and gave him the strength of 10 men, and in his enhanced state he escaped the prison that had held him since birth, leaving behind a trail of bodies and a legend that would spread across the criminal underworld. Bane had only one goal now: to prove he was the best, to conquer, and he had chosen his target carefully. Gotham City, the Batman, the one opponent whose defeat would cement Bane's reputation as the ultimate warrior. But Bane was not a fool who rushed in without preparation. He spent months studying Batman. He watched from the shadows. He learned the Dark Knight's patterns, his methods, his psychology. He studied every case file, every news report, every rumor about the Batman, and he discovered something crucial. Batman was human. Behind the legend, behind the symbol, there was a man who could be exhausted, a man who could be weakened, a man who could be broken. Bane's plan was elegant in its brutality. He would not simply fight Batman, he would destroy him completely, physically and psychologically. And the first phase of that plan began on a night that would be remembered as the worst in Gotham's history. Arkham Asylum exploded. Not literally, though there was fire and smoke, but every cell door in the facility opened simultaneously. Every security system failed, every restraint released, and the inmates, the worst collection of criminally insane killers ever assembled in one place, poured out into Gotham like a flood of madness made flesh. The Joker walked out laughing. Scarecrow emerged with his fear toxin ready. Poison Ivy left trailing vines that would strangle anyone who came close. The Riddler, the Mad Hatter, Zaze, Firefly, Cornelius Stirk, Amygdala, every twisted mind that Batman had put away over the years, they all escaped at once. And standing outside the asylum, watching his handiwork with satisfaction, was Bane. Let the games begin, he said to himself, knowing that Batman would have no choice but to hunt down every single escapee, knowing that the Dark Knight would not rest, would not stop, would not allow himself a moment's peace while these monsters roamed his city. And Batman did exactly what Bane predicted. For 3 months, Batman barely slept. He fought villain after villain, case after case, never stopping, never resting. He recaptured the Joker after a hostage situation at a television station. He stopped Scarecrow from poisoning the water supply with fear toxin. He prevented Poison Ivy from turning Robinson Park into a carnivorous jungle. He solved the Riddler's death traps and saved the victims before they could be killed. Each night brought a new crisis. Each dawn found Batman more exhausted than the night before. Alfred begged him to rest, to let the police handle some of it, to accept that he couldn't be everywhere at once. But Bruce refused. This was his responsibility. These were his villains. Gotham was his city, and he would protect it no matter the cost. "Master Bruce, you've been awake for 48 hours, Alfred said one morning, watching Bruce stumble into the cave after another night of fighting. "Your body has limits. Even you cannot ignore them forever." "Gotham needs me," Bruce replied, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Just a few more, just until they're all back in Arkham." But there was always one more, always another emergency, always another villain that only Batman could stop. And with each passing night, Batman grew slower, weaker, less effective. His reflexes dulled, his deductions took longer, his punches had less impact. He was running on fumes, on willpower alone, on the stubborn refusal to admit that he was human. Bane watched it all from the shadows. He had orchestrated this perfectly. Every Arkham breakout, every villain causing chaos, It was all designed to exhaust Batman, to weaken him, to bring the legendary Dark Knight down to the level of an ordinary, tired, broken man. And when Batman finally captured the last escapee, when he thought he could finally rest, Bane struck. Batman returned to Wayne Manor in the early hours of the morning. He had been awake for 72 hours straight. Every muscle ached. Every bone felt like lead. He could barely stand as he entered through the secret entrance that led to the Batcave. All he wanted was to collapse onto a cot and sleep for a week. But someone was waiting for him in the cave. At first, Bruce thought it was a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. A massive figure stood in the center of the Batcave. A man nearly 7 feet tall with muscles that seemed to ripple with barely contained power. He wore a mask that covered the lower half of his face, tubes running from it to a device on his back that pumped venom directly into his system. And his eyes, intelligent and cold, fixed on Batman with the intensity of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "Batman," the man said, his voice accented but clear, carrying an odd formality. "I am Bane, and I have come to break you." Bruce tried to react, tried to defend himself, but his exhausted body betrayed him. Bane moved with shocking speed for someone so large, crossing the distance between them in seconds. His fist connected with Batman's jaw, and Bruce felt something crack. He stumbled backward, trying to raise his guard, trying to find the energy to fight. But there was nothing left to give. Bane systematically dismantled him. Every punch landed with the force of a sledgehammer. Every kick drove the air from Batman's lungs. And all the while Bane talked, explaining his plan, describing how he had studied Batman, how he had orchestrated the Arkham breakout specifically to weaken him. "I did not want to fight you at your best," Bane said, catching Batman's weak punch and twisting his arm until bones ground together. "Where is the victory in that? No, I wanted to prove that even at your weakest, even broken and exhausted, you are still less than me. That the legend of the Batman is just that. A legend, and legends can be shattered." Batman tried every technique he knew, every fighting style he had mastered, every strategy he had developed over years of combat. But it was useless. His body wouldn't respond. His muscles were too tired. His mind was too foggy from lack of sleep. And Bane was too strong, too fast, too prepared. The fight moved through the Batcave, past the computer systems and the trophy room and the medical bay. Blood dripped from Batman's mouth, from cuts above his eyes, from a gash on his forehead. His ribs were cracked, possibly broken. His left arm hung at an odd angle, and still Bane came, relentless, unstoppable, like a force of nature in human form. Alfred tried to intervene, rushing from the manor with a shotgun, but Bane simply backhanded him across the cave. The loyal butler crashed into equipment and lay still, unconscious but breathing, and Batman, seeing Alfred hurt, found one last reserve of strength, one final burst of desperate energy. He launched himself at Bane with everything he had left. For a moment, just a moment, he actually drove the larger man back. His fists connected with Bane's face. His kicks landed on Bane's body. It was Batman at his most primal, fighting not with technique but with pure will, with the desperate fury of a man protecting his family. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Bane caught Batman mid-punch. He lifted the Dark Knight above his head, holding him there for a moment that seemed to last forever. Batman struggled, but his body had nothing left. No strength, no energy, no hope. "I am Bane," the villain said, "and I am your reckoning." Then he brought Batman down across his knee. The sound of Bruce Wayne's spine breaking echoed through the Batcave like a thunderclap. It was the sound of a legend ending, the sound of a symbol shattering, the sound of the impossible becoming reality. Batman, the Dark Knight, the protector of Gotham, the man who had faced down gods and monsters and emerged victorious, was broken, literally broken. His back shattered, his spine severed, his body paralyzed from the waist down. Bane dropped him to the floor like a discarded doll. Batman lay there, unable to move his legs, barely able to breathe, staring up at the ceiling of his own cave. The place that had been his sanctuary, his fortress, his home, was now the site of his greatest defeat. "Gotham is mine now," Bane said, standing over the broken Batman, "and I want you to watch as I take it. I want you to see everything you built crumble. That is my gift to you. Not death, but the knowledge that you failed, that you were not strong enough, that you were never the legend they believed you to be." Bane left the Batcave, leaving Alfred to crawl to Bruce's side, leaving the Dark Knight broken on the floor of his own headquarters. And as news spread through Gotham's underworld that Batman was defeated, that the Dark Knight had fallen, the city began to tear itself apart. Bruce Wayne spent weeks in the hospital, doctors telling him he would never walk again, physical therapy that brought agony but no progress, nights staring at the ceiling, reliving the moment his back broke, hearing that sound over and over in his mind. But Bruce Wayne had always been stubborn. He refused to accept defeat. He sought out specialists, experimental treatments, anyone who might restore his spine. He traveled to a doctor named Chandra Kinsolving, who used a combination of surgery and psychic healing to repair the damage Bane had done. Meanwhile, Gotham needed a Batman. The city was falling into chaos without its Dark Knight. Bruce, unable to wear the cowl himself, made a decision he would later regret. He chose Jean-Paul Valley, a man who had been genetically engineered and mentally conditioned by an ancient order called the Order of St. Dumas, to be an assassin called Azrael, to take over as Batman. At first, Valley seemed to perform well. He stopped crimes, caught criminals, kept the peace. But slowly the mental conditioning began to reassert itself. Valley became more violent, more brutal. He added armor to the Batsuit, weapons to the utility belt. He stopped being a symbol of justice and became an angel of vengeance, punishing rather than protecting. Bruce watched in horror as his symbol was corrupted, as everything he had built was twisted into something dark and cruel. But he was still healing, still unable to walk, unable to stop the transformation of Batman from hero to executioner. It took months, but Bruce eventually healed. Through sheer force of will and the skill of Dr. Kinsolving, his spine was repaired. He learned to walk again, then to run, then to fight. And as his body healed, his determination grew. He would reclaim the mantle of Batman. He would restore the symbol. He would prove that Bane had not broken him, only bent him, and that he was stronger for surviving. The confrontation with Jean-Paul Valley was brutal. Valley, lost in his conditioning, refused to give up the cowl. He saw himself as a better Batman, one willing to do what Bruce would not, to kill if necessary, to rule through fear rather than inspire through justice. But Bruce had learned something from his defeat by Bane. He had learned that being Batman wasn't about being the strongest or the most brutal. It was about being a symbol, about representing hope in the darkness, about showing Gotham that someone cared enough to fight for it every single night. Bruce defeated Valley not through superior strength, but through superior understanding of what Batman truly was. He stripped away Valley's armor, his weapons, his rage, and showed him the man underneath, broken and lost and consumed by programming he couldn't escape. Batman was restored. Bruce Wayne wore the cowl again, and Gotham had its true Dark Knight back. But the scars remained. Physical scars on Bruce's back where his spine had been shattered and repaired. Psychological scars from knowing that he had been broken, that he had failed, that his symbol had been corrupted. And strategic scars. Lessons learned about the dangers of pushing himself too far, of trying to do everything alone, of believing in his own invincibility. Bane had wanted to break Batman. In some ways he succeeded. The Batman who emerged from that experience was different, more cautious, more aware of his own limitations. But in other ways, Bane failed completely. Because Batman was more than just Bruce Wayne's body. It was an idea, a symbol, a promise to Gotham that someone would always stand against the darkness. And ideas, as Bruce Wayne understood better than anyone, cannot be broken. They can only grow stronger from the attempt. Gotham slept a little easier, knowing its Dark Knight had returned. The bat signal shone against the clouds once more, and somewhere in Arkham Asylum, Bane sat in his cell, pumping venom into his veins, and wondered if he had truly won, or if Batman's survival was itself a defeat for everything Bane believed about strength and weakness. The answer, like so many things in Gotham, depended on who you asked and what you believed about the nature of heroism itself. There are enemies who emerge from shadows you've never seen, and then there are enemies who emerge from shadows you thought were safe, from memories you believed were innocent, from a past you assumed was understood. The latter kind of enemy is far more dangerous because they know you in ways strangers never could. Tommy Elliot was Bruce Wayne's childhood friend. They grew up together in the rarefied world of Gotham's elite, two boys from wealthy families who played in mansion gardens and attended the same private schools. They shared secrets the way children do, made promises about the future, imagined adventures they would have when they grew up. Tommy was the one person outside of his parents that young Bruce trusted completely. But what Bruce didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Tommy hated him. Not the casual jealousy of childhood, but a deep, consuming hatred that poisoned every moment of their friendship. Tommy looked at Bruce's life and saw everything he wanted but couldn't have. Bruce's parents loved him unconditionally. The Wayne family was respected, admired, powerful, not just through wealth but through genuine contribution to society. Meanwhile, Tommy's parents were cold, distant, their wealth built on manipulation and cruelty behind closed doors. When Tommy was a boy, barely older than 10, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He cut the brake lines on his parents' car, not in a moment of rage or passion, but with cold calculation, planning it carefully, executing it perfectly. The car crashed, his father died, but his mother survived. And the one person who saved her, who performed the surgery that kept her alive, was Dr. Thomas Wayne. Tommy never forgave Bruce's father for that. In his twisted logic, Thomas Wayne had stolen Tommy's chance at freedom, at inheriting his family's wealth without parental control, at becoming the master of his own destiny. And by extension, Tommy blamed Bruce for simply existing in a family that cared, that intervened, that represented everything Tommy could never have. The hatred festered for years. Tommy became a surgeon like Thomas Wayne, not out of admiration but out of mockery, learning to cut and heal so he could eventually cut and harm. He watched from a distance as Bruce's parents were murdered, and while Gotham mourned, Tommy celebrated privately. Finally, Bruce would know loss. Finally, Bruce would understand pain. But then Bruce became Batman. He transformed his tragedy into purpose, his pain into power. He became a symbol, a legend, someone who mattered far beyond mere wealth or status. And Tommy's hatred evolved into obsession. It wasn't enough to hate Bruce Wayne anymore. Now he had to destroy Batman as well. Tommy Elliot became Hush, a name chosen for its simplicity and its meaning. Hush, be quiet, keep secrets, conceal identity. It was perfect for someone who would operate from the shadows, who would use disguise and deception as weapons, who would turn Batman's own methods against him. The plan Hush conceived was masterful in its complexity. He would not simply attack Batman directly. That was the mistake other villains made, trying to overpower or outwit the Dark Knight in direct confrontation. No, Hush would orchestrate a conspiracy so elaborate that Batman wouldn't see the truth until it was too late. He would use every villain, every ally, every piece of Batman's world as weapons against him. It began with the Riddler. Edward Nygma had been a constant thorn in Batman's side for years, leaving clues and riddles at crime scenes like signatures on his work. But the Riddler had recently discovered something that made all his previous crimes seem like child's play. Through careful observation and deduction, through analyzing Batman's movements and patterns, through connecting pieces that no one else had thought to connect, the Riddler had discovered Batman's greatest secret. He knew that Batman was Bruce Wayne. The Riddler sat on this information for weeks, trying to decide what to do with it. Should he reveal it to the world? Use it for blackmail? Simply kill Bruce Wayne in his sleep? But every option seemed insufficient, anticlimactic for a secret this monumental. And that's when Hush approached him with an offer. Use the information to destroy Batman completely. Not kill him, but break him psychologically, strategically, emotionally, turn his own life into a puzzle he cannot solve. And in exchange, the Riddler would have the satisfaction of being part of Batman's ultimate defeat. The Riddler agreed. The conspiracy began with small incidents. Poison Ivy used her mind control abilities on Catwoman, turning one of Batman's closest allies into an enemy. Harley Quinn attacked with unusual precision, as if someone was feeding her tactical information. Killer Croc emerged from the sewers at exactly the right moment to intercept Batman during another investigation. Each incident seemed random, but Batman's detective instincts told him something was wrong. There was a pattern, a coordination that suggested a mastermind behind the chaos. Then came the moment that nearly broke Batman's resolve entirely. Jason Todd appeared. The second Robin, the boy who had died at the Joker's hands years ago, beaten with a crowbar and left in an exploding warehouse. Bruce had carried that guilt every day since. The knowledge that he had failed to save his adopted son, that Jason had died because Bruce had brought him into this war. But now Jason stood on a Gotham rooftop, alive, whole, as if death had been just another temporary inconvenience. He spoke with Jason's voice, moved with Jason's mannerisms, knew things only Jason could know. Batman's analytical mind told him it was impossible, that the dead don't return, that this had to be a trick, a deception. But his heart, the part of him that was still Bruce Wayne, wanted desperately to believe. "Bruce," Jason said, using the name that no one should know, confirming the Riddler's discovery. "I'm back. I found a way. We can be a family again." Batman investigated frantically, using every scientific method, every detection device. DNA tests confirmed it was Jason Todd. Fingerprints matched. Retinal scans were identical. Every piece of evidence said this was real, that somehow, impossibly, Jason had returned from death. But it was all a lie. The Jason Todd that appeared was Clayface, the shape-shifting villain who could mimic anyone perfectly down to the cellular level. Hosh had hired him, provided him with samples of the real Jason's DNA to integrate into his malleable form, coached him on Jason's speech patterns and memories. It was a perfect deception designed to exploit Batman's greatest guilt and deepest hope. While Batman was distracted by the possibility of Jason's return, Hush moved against him on multiple fronts. He attacked Batman's allies, targeting Nightwing, Robin, Oracle, anyone who stood in the Bat family. He manipulated Gotham's criminals into coordinated attacks that stretched Batman's resources thin, and he waited for the moment when Batman would be most vulnerable, most desperate, most willing to believe in something impossible. The confrontation came in an alley, symbolically chosen, Crime Alley, where Bruce's parents had died, where Batman had been born from tragedy. Hosh revealed himself there, unwrapping the bandages that covered his face to show features that were surgically altered but still recognizable. Tommy Elliot, childhood friend, now become the enemy who knew Bruce Wayne better than perhaps anyone alive. "Hello, Bruce," Tommy said, his smile twisted with years of hatred. "Surprise. It's been a long time since we played together, hasn't it? But I never stopped playing. I just changed the game." Batman felt reality shift beneath his feet. Tommy Elliot, his friend from childhood, someone he had trusted, someone he had mourned when Tommy had supposedly died in a car accident years ago. But that death, like Jason's return, had been another deception. Tommy had faked his own death to operate in shadows, to become Hush, to plan this elaborate revenge. "Why?" Batman asked, the question carrying the weight of betrayed friendship, of innocence lost, of a past that was now revealed as a lie. "Why?" Tommy laughed, the sound bitter and cold. "Because you had everything, Bruce. Everything I wanted. Loving parents who actually cared. A legacy of respect instead of fear. And when you lost them, when you finally understood what loss meant, you turned it into something meaningful. You became Batman. You became a legend, while I just became more invisible, more forgotten, more nothing." The fight that followed was brutal. Tommy had trained, had prepared, had studied Bruce's fighting style for decades. He knew every move, every technique, every strategy, and he had enhanced himself with performance drugs, with surgical improvements, with every advantage modern science could provide. He was not as strong as Bane, not as skilled as Ra's al Ghul, but he knew Bruce Wayne in ways those enemies never could. He knew which attacks would hurt emotionally as well as physically. "Your father saved my mother," Tommy snarled as they fought through the alley. "Saved her when all I wanted was freedom from her. Thomas Wayne stole my future, and you got to keep your perfect family for years while I suffered. Even your tragedy was better than my life." Batman realized the horrible truth. Tommy had been broken long before Bruce was, broken by a childhood of coldness and neglect that Bruce's loving parents had protected him from. In another world, with different circumstances, Tommy might have been saved. But his bitterness had poisoned him too thoroughly. His hatred had consumed him too completely. The fight moved to the rooftops. then to an old building that Tommy had rigged with traps and weapons. It was a maze of death, designed specifically for Batman, incorporating elements from Bruce's training, his methods, his psychology. Every trap was personal. Every danger targeted something Bruce cared about. In the final confrontation, Tommy held a detonator. He had planted bombs throughout Gotham, in hospitals and schools and orphanages, places Bruce cared about, places that represented hope and healing. The choice was simple: let Tommy escape or risk the lives of thousands of innocents. "You see, Bruce," Tommy said, backing toward an exit, "I win. Even when you beat me, I win, because I've shown you that your past was a lie, that even your oldest friendship was poisoned. How many other people in your life are secretly waiting to betray you? How many other allies are actually enemies in disguise?" Batman let him go. He couldn't risk the bombs, couldn't gamble with innocent lives, and Tommy Elliot, Hush, disappeared into Gotham's shadows, leaving Batman standing alone in the ruins of a building that had once housed happy memories now revealed as hollow. The bombs were fake. Of course they were. It was one more psychological wound, one more reminder that Hush's real target was Batman's ability to trust, to believe, to maintain human connections. The physical battle was secondary to the emotional destruction. In the aftermath, Batman investigated every aspect of his life with paranoid intensity. He questioned allies, reviewed security protocols, analyzed relationships for signs of deception. The revelation that Tommy had been an enemy all along, that Bruce's childhood had contained this seed of hatred, it poisoned his ability to trust his own judgment. Catwoman found him on a rooftop one night, standing in the rain looking over Gotham with eyes that seemed to see threats everywhere. "You can't let him win like this," she said softly, understanding what Hush had done even if she didn't know all the details. "If you stop trusting everyone, if you push away everyone who cares about you, then he's destroyed Batman more effectively than any physical attack ever could." "How do I know?" Batman replied, and his voice carried a weariness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "How do I know who's real, and who's another Clayface? Who's an ally, and who's another Tommy Elliot waiting for the right moment?" "You don't," Catwoman said. "That's the risk of caring about anyone. But the alternative is being alone, truly alone. And that's not Batman. That's just Bruce Wayne trapped in a costume, fighting a war he's already lost." Batman was quiet for a long time, processing her words, weighing them against the paranoia that Hush had cultivated. Finally, he nodded slightly, accepting the truth even if it was uncomfortable. Trust was a risk. But without it, without connections to humanity, Batman was just another monster hiding in Gotham's shadows. Hush remained at large, his whereabouts unknown, his next move unpredictable. The Riddler kept Batman's secret, bound by some twisted code that made revealing it less satisfying than watching Batman struggle with the knowledge that someone knew. And Tommy Elliot, childhood friend turned mortal enemy, became another name on the list of threats that Batman monitored constantly. But the deepest wound wasn't physical or even tactical. It was the loss of innocence, the destruction of childhood memories that had been among the few purely good things Bruce Wayne had left. Every moment of his youth was now suspect, tainted by the knowledge that his friend had been harboring murderous hatred, even as they played together in Wayne Manor's gardens. Alfred found Bruce in the study one evening, looking at an old photograph. It showed two boys, Bruce and Tommy, smiling at the camera, arms around each other's shoulders, the picture of friendship and innocence. "Master Bruce," Alfred said gently, "dwelling on what was false will not restore what was true." "Was any of it true?" Bruce asked. "Or was Tommy always broken, always planning, always hating? Was I so blind that I couldn't see it?" "Children rarely see the darkness in other children," Alfred replied. "That's not blindness, that's childhood. Tommy Elliot chose to nurture his bitterness into hatred. That choice was his, not yours. You are not responsible for the monster he became." Bruce set down the photograph, but he didn't put it away. It stayed on his desk, a reminder that evil could wear familiar faces, that enemies could emerge from the places you thought were safe, that the past was never quite as simple or as innocent as memory suggested. Gotham continued its eternal cycle. Criminals committed crimes. Batman stopped them. The city breathed its polluted air and pretended it was getting better. And somewhere in the shadows, Hush watched and planned and waited for another opportunity to strike at the Dark Knight, to twist the knife of betrayal deeper into Bruce Wayne's carefully armored heart. But Batman endured. He always endured, because that's what symbols do. They persist through doubt, through betrayal, through the revelation that even childhood friendships can be corrupted by hatred. They stand as reminders that no matter how dark the night becomes, someone is still watching, still protecting, still refusing to let the monsters win. Even when those monsters have the face of a friend. Death is supposed to be final. In Gotham, that's one of the few constants you can rely on. Buildings crumble and are rebuilt. Criminals are caught and escape. Politicians promise reform and deliver corruption, but the dead stay dead. They have to. Because if death loses its permanence, then what meaning does anything have? Jason Todd had been dead for years. Batman carried that weight every single night. Jason had been the second Robin, a street kid from Crime Alley, who tried to steal the wheels off the Batmobile, and ended up becoming part of the Bat family. He was rougher than Dick Grayson, angrier, more willing to cross lines that Batman had drawn in absolute terms. Bruce saw in Jason a reflection of what he himself might have become without Alfred's guidance, without the discipline and purpose that shaped his rage into something constructive. But Jason's anger was harder to contain, harder to direct. He wanted to hurt the criminals they fought, not just stop them. He saw Batman's moral code as weakness, as a handicap that let monsters like the Joker continue killing. And that difference in philosophy, that fundamental disagreement about justice versus vengeance, created a tension that neither Bruce nor Jason knew how to resolve. Then came the night that changed everything. Jason discovered that his birth mother was still alive. Not the woman who had raised him in Crime Alley, but his biological mother. She was in Ethiopia, working as a humanitarian aid worker. Jason, desperate for connection to his past, desperate to understand where he came from, went to find her, and Batman, concerned for his safety, followed. What they found was a trap. Jason's mother, Sheila Haywood, was being blackmailed by the Joker. She had been stealing medical supplies, selling them to support a drug habit, and the Clown Prince of Crime had discovered her secret. He offered her a choice: betray her son, or be exposed and imprisoned. She chose betrayal. Sheila led Jason into a warehouse where the Joker was waiting, and the Joker, with methodical cruelty, beat the boy with a crowbar. Each strike was accompanied by a laugh, each blow calculated to cause maximum pain without immediate death. He wanted Jason to suffer, wanted him to understand the punchline of the cosmic joke that was his existence. Batman arrived too late. He found Jason broken and barely breathing, his mother cowering in the corner, and a timer ticking down on a bomb. There was time to save one of them, Jason or Sheila. Bruce grabbed them both, tried to carry them both to safety, but the explosion came too soon. The warehouse erupted in flames and debris. Bruce was thrown clear by the blast. When he regained consciousness and dug through the rubble, he found Sheila dead, and beside her Jason's body, small and broken, the Robin costume torn and stained with blood. Batman cradled the boy in his arms as sirens approached, as the reality of his failure settled onto his shoulders like a weight that would never lift. He buried Jason Todd in a cemetery on the outskirts of Gotham. The headstone read simply, "Jason Todd, a good soldier." But the words felt hollow. Jason hadn't been a soldier. He had been a child, a boy that Bruce had brought into his war, a son that Bruce had failed to protect. Years passed. Batman continued his crusade, but a piece of him died in that warehouse. He became more cautious with his partners, more protective of Robin, more haunted by the knowledge that his mission could cost the lives of those he cared about. The empty display case in the Batcave, where Jason's Robin costume had once been stored, now held only the damaged uniform from that terrible night, a memorial and a reminder. And then, impossibly, Jason came back. It began with a new crime lord appearing in Gotham's underworld. He called himself the Red Hood, a name with history in Gotham's criminal mythology. The Red Hood had been the identity the Joker wore before his transformation, the persona of the failed comedian who fell into chemicals and emerged as the Clown Prince of Crime. For someone to claim that name now was either incredibly bold or incredibly stupid. But this Red Hood was neither. He was strategic, efficient, and terrifyingly effective. The Red Hood moved through Gotham's criminal network like a scalpel cutting out disease. He targeted the worst offenders, the drug dealers who sold to children, the human traffickers, the ones who preyed on the vulnerable. But unlike Batman, the Red Hood had no prohibition against killing. He executed criminals with precision, leaving their bodies as messages to others who might consider similar crimes. At first, Batman assumed it was just another vigilante, another person who had decided that Gotham's darkness required darker methods to combat. But something about the Red Hood's tactics felt familiar. The way he moved, the strategies he employed, the intimate knowledge of Batman's own methods and how to counter them. It all suggested someone who had been trained by the Dark Knight himself. The confrontation came on a rooftop in Crime Alley, the place where both Batman and Jason Todd had been born from tragedy. The Red Hood stood waiting, his helmet reflecting the city lights, his body language relaxed but ready. "Hello, Bruce," the Red Hood said, and Batman's blood ran cold. The voice was distorted by the helmet's modulation, but something in the cadence, in the way he said the name, felt achingly familiar. "Who are you?" Batman demanded, though part of him already knew, already understood the impossible truth. The Red Hood reached up and removed his helmet, and Batman found himself staring at the face of Jason Todd, older, harder, marked by scars that hadn't been there before, but unmistakably alive. Surprised, Jason asked, his smile bitter and cold. "You should be. Death is supposed to be permanent, right? But apparently in this world even that rule has exceptions." Batman's mind raced through possibilities, explanations, rationalizations, cloning technology, shapeshifters like Clayface, advanced robotics. Anything except the truth that stood before him, because the truth was impossible. The dead don't return. They can't. But Jason was real. Batman's analytical capabilities, honed through years of detective work, confirmed it. This was Jason Todd, resurrected, returned from death through means that defied everything Batman understood about the world. The explanation, when it came, was almost as disturbing as the resurrection itself. Ra's al Ghul, the immortal eco-terrorist who had been both enemy and uneasy ally to Batman over the years, had discovered Jason's grave. Ra's had his own complicated relationship with death, having used the mystical Lazarus pits for centuries to extend his life, to heal mortal wounds, to cheat mortality itself. The pits were pools of alchemical substances that could restore life, but at a cost. They brought madness, rage, amplified the worst aspects of a person's psyche. Ra's, in a moment of guilt or curiosity or some twisted sense of honor, had exhumed Jason's body and immersed it in a Lazarus pit. The chemicals did their work, knitting together broken bones, restarting a heart that had been silent for months, dragging Jason Todd back from whatever afterlife he had found. But Jason returned wrong. The Lazarus pit had healed his body but fractured his mind. His memories were jumbled, incomplete. His emotions were amplified, twisted, and his understanding of right and wrong had been corrupted by the rage that the pit instilled in all who used it. For months, Jason wandered in a haze, his mind slowly reassembling itself, his memories slowly returning, and when he finally understood what had happened, when he finally remembered his death and the circumstances surrounding it, he was consumed by a singular question. Why hadn't Batman killed the Joker? "I died," Jason said, his voice carrying years of pain and rage. "The Joker beat me to death with a crowbar while you were too slow to save me. And what did you do afterward? You put him back in Arkham. Again, just like you always do, just like you always will. How many people has he killed since then, Bruce? How many children? How many innocents? And their blood is on your hands because you refuse to do what's necessary." "Killing him wouldn't bring you back," Batman replied, his voice steady despite the emotional turmoil beneath. "It wouldn't undo what happened. It would just make me like him, make us all like him." "No," Jason said, shaking his head. "It would make you responsible. It would mean you value human life more than you value your precious moral code. Every person the Joker has killed since my death is someone you chose not to save by refusing to end him." The philosophical divide between them was the same one that had existed before Jason's death, but now it was amplified by resurrection and rage. Jason believed that some people were beyond redemption, that mercy toward monsters was cruelty toward their victims. Batman believed that the line between justice and vengeance was the only thing separating heroes from villains, and that crossing it even once would mean losing everything he stood for. "I won't kill," Batman said simply. "Not the Joker, not anyone. That's the rule. That's the line I don't cross." "Then you're a fool," Jason replied, "and you're getting people killed with your rules." What followed was not a fight, but a test. Jason had planned this confrontation carefully. He had captured the Joker, beaten him bloody, and brought him to Crime Alley. Now he presented Batman with an ultimatum designed to break the Dark Knight's moral code or prove his convictions. Jason held a gun to the Joker's head. In his other hand, he held another gun pointed at his own temple, and he offered Batman a choice. "Kill him," Jason said, gesturing to the Joker, who was laughing despite his injuries, despite the gun pressed to his skull. "Pull the trigger and end this. End him. Save all the lives he would take in the future. Or kill me, put me back in the grave where I belong. Or do nothing and let me kill him myself. But if you do nothing, I die too. I pull this trigger and I'm gone again. So choose, Bruce. Choose who lives and who dies, because that's what you've been doing all along, whether you admit it or not." Batman stood frozen, trapped between impossible options. Kill the Joker and violate every principle he had built his life around. Kill Jason and destroy any hope of redemption for his former partner. Or do nothing and let Jason become a murderer. Let him damn himself in the name of vengeance. The moment stretched into eternity. The Joker laughed, amused by the tableau, by the psychological torture playing out before him. Jason's finger tightened on both triggers, his resolve absolute, and Batman made his choice. He threw a batarang not at Jason or the Joker, but at the gun pointed at the Joker's head, knocking it from Jason's hand. The explosion that followed, the chaos and violence, it obscured what happened next. When the smoke cleared, the Joker had escaped. Jason was gone, and Batman stood alone in Crime Alley once again. But this time, the loss was different. Jason wasn't dead. He was out there somewhere, alive, but lost, consumed by rage and righteousness, convinced that his methods were the only ones that worked. He became a persistent thorn in Batman's side, sometimes ally, sometimes enemy, always a reminder of failure and of the cost of Bruce's mission. In the Batcave, Bruce stood before the empty display case that had once held Jason's Robin costume. The damaged uniform was still there, blood-stained and torn, but now it represented something more complex than simple loss. It represented the price of resurrection, the danger of second chances twisted by rage, the impossibility of undoing the past. Alfred joined him in the cave, as he always did when Bruce needed silent support. "He's alive," Bruce said quietly.
"I should be grateful. I should be celebrating. But all I feel is guilt. Guilt that I failed him twice. Once by letting him die, and again by not being able to bring him back from the darkness the Lazarus pit created."
"Master Jason made his own choices," Alfred replied, "both before his death and after his resurrection. You cannot save people from themselves, Master Bruce. You can only offer them alternatives and hope they choose wisely." "He thinks I'm wrong," Bruce continued. "He thinks my refusal to kill makes me responsible for every death that follows. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am choosing my moral code over human lives." "Or perhaps," Alfred said gently, "you're choosing to believe that humanity is worth preserving even in monsters, that redemption is possible even for the irredeemable." Master Jason has forgotten that belief. He's forgotten what it means to hope. That's the true tragedy, not his death or even his resurrection, but the loss of hope that came with it. Batman was silent, processing Alfred's words, weighing them against Jason's accusations. The question had no easy answer. The moral calculus of heroism never did. Every choice had consequences. Every action ripples that spread through lives and years. Jason Todd was alive, but the boy who had been Robin was gone, replaced by someone harder, angrier, more willing to do what Batman would not. And Bruce had to live with that knowledge, had to face the reality that sometimes the people you save don't want to be saved, and sometimes resurrection is just another form of tragedy. Gotham continued its eternal cycle, indifferent to the moral struggles of its protectors. The Red Hood operated in the shadows, killing those he deemed deserving, saving those he deemed innocent. Batman pursued his mission with renewed questioning, wondering if Jason was right, if mercy toward monsters was cruelty toward their victims. And somewhere in Arkham Asylum, the Joker laughed at the beautiful chaos he had created, the wedge he had driven between Batman and Robin, the proof that his philosophy of one bad day breaking anyone applied even to death itself. The dead had returned, but death itself had lost its meaning in Gotham, and Batman, standing in his cave, surrounded by reminders of failures and losses, wondered if that was just one more price he would have to pay for wearing the cowl, for fighting a war that never ended, and never would. Some wounds don't heal, some deaths don't stay permanent, and some choices haunt you forever, no matter which option you choose. Bruce Wayne thought he knew Gotham. He had studied every street, every alley, every building in his city. He had walked the rooftops for years, had explored the sewers and the subway tunnels, had mapped the entire urban landscape in his mind with the precision of a master cartographer. He believed with absolute certainty that there were no secrets left in Gotham that he hadn't uncovered. He was wrong. It began with a murder, not unusual in Gotham where death was as common as rain and just as inevitable. But this murder was different. The victim was a city planner named Peter Barrow, found dead in his apartment with a single throwing knife embedded in his chest. The knife was old, antique, forged in a style that hadn't been used in over a century, and the handle bore a symbol that made Batman's blood run cold. An owl. Batman knew the symbol. Every child raised in Gotham knew it, though most thought it was just a nursery rhyme, a scary story told to keep children from wandering at night. The rhyme went like this: beware the court of owls that watches all the time, ruling Gotham from a shadowed perch behind granite and lime. They watch you at your hearth, they watch you in your bed. Speak not a whispered word of them, or they'll send the talon for your head. It was nonsense, urban legend, a story created to explain Gotham's corruption, to give a face to the abstract concept of powerful people controlling the city from shadows. There was no court of owls. There couldn't be. Batman would have found them years ago if they existed. But the knife in Peter Barrow's chest suggested otherwise. Batman investigated the murder with his usual thoroughness. He analyzed the knife's metallurgy, traced its manufacturing origins to a foundry that had closed in 1894. He examined the wound pattern, noting the precision that suggested professional training. He interviewed Barrow's colleagues and discovered that the planner had been researching Gotham's architectural history, specifically looking into buildings that had unusual structural anomalies, spaces that existed on original blueprints but had been sealed off or hidden in modern renovations. The more Batman investigated, the more murders he discovered. Not recent ones, but deaths stretching back decades, even centuries. Politicians who had opposed certain construction projects, dying in convenient accidents. Activists who had fought against corporate interests, found dead of apparent suicides. Journalists who had dug too deeply into Gotham's history, victims of random muggings that were anything but random. Each death, when examined closely, bore signs of professional assassination, and each victim had been investigating or interfering with something related to Gotham's infrastructure, its power structures, its hidden history. Batman's investigation led him to the old archives beneath the city planning office, to records that hadn't been accessed in generations, and there, in documents yellowed with age, he found references to a secret society, the Court of Owls. Not a legend, but a reality. A group of Gotham's wealthiest and most powerful families who had controlled the city since its founding, who met in secret to decide policy, to eliminate threats, to shape Gotham according to their vision. But it was the list of members that truly shocked Batman. Names he recognized, families that still held power in Gotham, and among them, a name that made his heart stop. Wayne. Alan Wayne, Bruce's great-great-grandfather, had been involved with the Court of Owls. But according to the records, Alan had opposed them, had tried to expose them, had fought against their control of Gotham, and Alan had died for it. Found dead in the sewers, his death ruled accidental but clearly anything but. Batman realized with growing horror that his family's history was intertwined with this conspiracy, that the Wayne legacy, which he had built his entire mission around, was connected to the very forces that had corrupted Gotham from its inception. He needed more information. He needed to find where the court met, where they kept their records, where they commanded their assassins from, and the search led him to a discovery that shook his understanding of Gotham to its foundations. The Court of Owls had nests throughout the city, secret rooms hidden in the walls of Gotham's oldest buildings, spaces that existed between floors, accessible only through hidden passages. And these nests were everywhere, in government buildings, in corporate headquarters, in museums and libraries. The court had been watching Gotham from inside its very structure, literally built into the architecture of the city. Batman found one of these nests in Old Wayne Tower, the building that had been constructed by Alan Wayne himself. It was hidden behind false walls, a room that shouldn't exist according to the blueprints, filled with owl memorabilia and surveillance equipment that had been watching Wayne Enterprises for decades. But discovering the nest was a trap. The court had been waiting for Batman to find them. They wanted him to know they existed, wanted him to understand the scope of their power. And as Batman explored the nest, looking for clues, the walls closed in. Literally, the room began to shift, panels moving, passages opening and closing, until Batman found himself in a labyrinth beneath Gotham. The maze was massive, stretching for miles beneath the city, a network of passages and chambers that had been built over centuries. The walls were covered in owl imagery, in symbols that seemed to watch from every angle, and the layout was designed specifically to disorient, to confuse, to break the mind of anyone trapped within. Batman was a master of navigation, of spatial awareness, of maintaining orientation even in the most chaotic environments. But the labyrinth was beyond anything he had encountered. Every passage looked identical. Every turn led to more turns. Time lost meaning in the endless corridors. And the court had ensured there were no supplies, no food, no water. They wanted Batman to wander until he died of thirst or starvation or madness. Days passed, maybe weeks. Batman couldn't tell. His body weakened from lack of sustenance. His mind began to play tricks, showing him things that weren't there. He saw his parents walking through the corridors, heard their voices calling to him. He saw Dick Grayson, saw Jason Todd, saw all the people he had failed, all the ghosts that haunted his conscience. The hallucinations grew worse. He saw himself as a boy, watched his parents die again and again in endless loops. He saw owls, thousands of them, perching on invisible branches, their eyes following his every move. He saw the court itself, figures in white owl masks, sitting in judgment, pronouncing him guilty of presumption, of believing he could understand Gotham, of thinking he could save a city that didn't want to be saved. But Bruce Wayne had always been stubborn. Even as his body failed, even as his mind fractured, he refused to give up. He used every technique he had learned from his training, every meditation practice, every mental discipline. He fought the hallucinations by acknowledging them, by understanding they were products of his own mind rather than reality. And slowly, painfully, he began to see patterns in the maze, subtle differences in the stone, variations in the owl carvings, air currents that suggested passages to the surface. His detective's mind, even compromised by starvation and exhaustion, found the clues that the court had believed were too subtle to detect. After 8 days in the labyrinth, Batman found the exit. He emerged into the Gotham night, his costume torn, his body emaciated, his mind barely holding together. But he had survived. He had escaped the court's trap, and now he knew they were real, knew they were watching, knew they were his enemies. But the revelation about the Court of Owls was only the beginning. Batman's investigation uncovered something even more disturbing. The court didn't just have wealth and influence. They had soldiers, assassins called Talons. The Talons were not normal humans. They were something else, something that shouldn't exist. The court had been kidnapping performers from traveling circuses for over a century, taking acrobats and aerialists, people with exceptional physical abilities. They subjected these captives to experiments, enhancing them with a substance called electrum, a metallic compound that granted regeneration, extended life and resistance to injury. Then they killed them, or rather, put them in a state that was death-adjacent, a suspended animation that could be reversed when the court needed their services. The Talons could be awakened, sent to eliminate targets, then returned to their undead sleep. They were the perfect assassins, loyal, skilled, and nearly impossible to kill permanently. Batman tracked the Talons to their resting place. a hidden chamber beneath Gotham where dozens of bodies lay in refrigerated cells, waiting to be awakened. The sight was horrific, a graveyard of assassins preserved in a state between life and death, their bodies wrapped in ceremonial owl armor, their faces locked in expressions of eternal sleep. And among the Talons, Batman found a name that made him understand the true scope of the court's reach: William Cobb, the primary Talon, the most skilled assassin the court had ever created. And according to the records, William Cobb had family in Gotham, a great-grandson who had grown up in Halley's Circus, who had been marked for recruitment by the court, who had been groomed to become the next generation of Talon. That great-grandson was Dick Grayson. Batman's mind reeled with the implications. Dick's parents, the Flying Graysons, hadn't died in a random accident. They had been murdered by the court, punishment for refusing to hand over their son. The trapeze ropes had been sabotaged because John and Mary Grayson had discovered what the court wanted to do with Dick, had tried to run, had attempted to save their son from the fate that awaited him. And Bruce, by adopting Dick that night, by taking him in and training him as Robin, had inadvertently saved him from becoming a Talon. Dick Grayson had been destined for undeath as an assassin, but Batman's intervention had given him a different path, a chance to be a hero instead of a weapon. When Batman confronted Dick with this information, when he explained the truth about the Flying Grayson's death, Dick's world shattered. Everything he had believed about his parents' murder was a lie. It wasn't random. It wasn't just crime in Gotham. It was a calculated execution by a secret society that wanted to turn him into a monster. "They wanted me," Dick said, his voice hollow with realization. "My parents died because of me, because the court wanted me to be one of them." "They died protecting you," Batman corrected. "They died so you could have a choice, so you wouldn't be forced into that life, and you chose to be a hero. You chose to honor them by saving people instead of killing them." But the revelation brought cold comfort. Dick had to live with the knowledge that his entire life had been shaped by forces he never knew existed, that his parents' death was part of a conspiracy that stretched back generations, that he had been marked as a weapon before he was even born. The Court of Owls, realizing that Batman knew their secrets, decided to eliminate him. They awakened their Talons, sent them after Batman, and everyone connected to him. The assault came at night, dozens of undead assassins attacking simultaneously across Gotham. Batman called in the Bat family, Dick Grayson as Nightwing, Tim Drake as Red Robin, Damian Wayne as Robin, Barbara Gordon providing intelligence as Oracle. Even Jason Todd joined the fight, putting aside his differences with Batman to face this common enemy. Together they fought the Talons through the streets of Gotham, a battle between the city's protectors and its hidden controllers. The fight was brutal. The Talons were skilled beyond normal human capability, enhanced by Electrum, driven by conditioning that made them fearless. They fought with a precision that came from decades, sometimes centuries of training. Each Talon was a master assassin, and there were dozens of them. But Batman had something the court didn't expect. He had family, not the biological kind that the court represented, but the chosen family of people who fought beside him, who trusted him, who believed in his mission. And that family, working together, was stronger than any army of undead assassins. The battle moved through Gotham, from the streets to the rooftops, from abandoned buildings to the Wayne Tower itself. Batman and Nightwing fought side by side against William Cobb, the Talon who would have been Dick's great-grandfather in another life. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. This was Dick fighting against the fate he had escaped, proving that blood didn't determine destiny, that choice mattered more than lineage. In the end, the Bat family defeated the Talons. They didn't kill them, couldn't bring themselves to destroy what were essentially victims of the court's manipulation, but they disabled them, removed their Electrum enhancements, returned them to the sleep from which they had been awakened. The Court of Owls scattered after their assassins fell. Some members were arrested, their identities exposed, their crimes brought to light. Others went deeper into hiding, retreating into shadows that Batman couldn't yet reach. The organization was broken, but not destroyed. It would take years, maybe decades, to fully root out their influence from Gotham's power structures. But Batman had accomplished something he thought impossible. He had discovered a secret that Gotham had kept for over 2 centuries, He had exposed a conspiracy that had controlled his city from its foundations, and he had saved Dick Grayson from a fate that would have turned him into everything Batman fought against. In the aftermath, Bruce stood in the Batcave, looking at a map of Gotham. He had marked every location where the court had hidden nests, every building that contained their secret rooms. The marks covered the map like a disease, showing just how deeply the court had infiltrated the city's very structure. "I thought I knew this city," Bruce said to Alfred, who stood beside him as always. "I thought I had learned every secret, explored every shadow, but the court was here all along, built into Gotham itself, and I never saw them." "One cannot see what one does not look for, Master Bruce," Alfred replied. "You were searching for criminals and madmen. You were not looking for conspiracies hidden in architecture, for power wielded through centuries of patience. That does not make you blind, it makes you human." "Dick's parents died because of them," Bruce continued. "Jason died because of my mission. Barbara was paralyzed because of the Joker. How many people have suffered because I decided to become Batman? How many lives have been destroyed by my war on crime?" Alfred was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Master Dick's parents died because they loved their son and protected him. Miss Barbara continues to serve Gotham as Oracle because she chooses to. Master Jason makes his own choices. However misguided, you did not cause their suffering. Master Bruce, Gotham did. The Court of Owls did. The criminals you fight every night did. You are not responsible for the darkness in this city. You are simply the one who refuses to let it win." Bruce wanted to believe that. He wanted to accept that the casualties of his mission were not his fault, that he couldn't save everyone, that some sacrifices were inevitable in the fight against evil. But the guilt remained, settled in his chest like a weight that never lifted, a burden that came with wearing the cowl. Dick found him later that night, still standing in front of the map, still staring at the marks that represented the court's influence. "I could have been one of them," Dick said quietly. "If you hadn't taken me in that night, if you hadn't given me a choice, I would have become a Talon. I would have been a killer, a weapon, everything we fight against." "But you didn't," Bruce replied. "You chose differently. You chose to be a hero. That's what matters." "Because of you," Dick said. "Because you saved me. Not just that night when my parents died, but every day since. You gave me a purpose that wasn't killing. You showed me that tragedy doesn't have to define you, that you can turn pain into something good. The court wanted to make me a monster, but you helped me become a hero instead." Bruce turned to look at his first protege, his first Robin, the one who had proven that the mission could survive beyond Batman himself. "I didn't make you a hero, Dick. You did that yourself. I just gave you the opportunity. The rest was always you." They stood together in the cave, mentor and student, father and son in all the ways that mattered, looking at the map of a city that had revealed yet another layer of darkness. Gotham would always have secrets, would always have conspiracies, would always have forces working against the light, but it would also always have protectors, people who refused to let the darkness win, who chose to fight even when the cost was high. The Court of Owls had ruled Gotham from shadows for 200 years. But now those shadows had light in them. Now Batman knew they existed, and knowledge, in the endless war for Gotham's soul, was the most powerful weapon of all. The city slept, unaware of how close it had come to remaining under the court's control forever. Somewhere in the hidden places of Gotham, the remaining court members plotted their return, planned new strategies, waited for Batman to become complacent. But they would find no complacency, only vigilance, only determination, only the eternal refusal to let Gotham fall to those who would control it from shadows. Batman had learned something fundamental in the labyrinth beneath Gotham, in the days when he wandered lost and hallucinating. He learned that the city was deeper than he had imagined, darker than he had believed, more complex than he could ever fully understand. But that wouldn't stop him from trying. That wouldn't make him surrender. That would only make him more determined to protect Gotham from all threats seen and unseen, known and hidden. Because that's what Batman did. He stood against the darkness, no matter how deep it went, no matter how many layers remained undiscovered. He stood, and he fought, and he refused to let the monsters win. Even when those monsters wore the faces of Gotham's founding families, even when they had been watching from the walls for centuries, even when they seemed impossible to defeat. especially then. The Joker had been missing for a year, not escaped, not in hiding, but genuinely absent from Gotham in a way that made everyone nervous. Because when the Joker was active, you knew what to expect. Chaos, murder, elaborate schemes with murderous punchlines. But when he was silent, when he disappeared completely, that was when you should be most afraid. Because silence from the Joker meant planning, preparation, the careful construction of something so terrible that even he needed time to perfect it. When he returned, it was with an entrance that would haunt Gotham for years to come. The Joker walked into Gotham City Police Headquarters in the middle of the day, not sneaking, not disguised, just walked through the front door like he had every right to be there. But something was wrong with his face, horribly, grotesquely wrong. His face was missing, not metaphorically, but literally. The skin of his face had been removed, cut away, leaving exposed muscle and bone beneath. And in his hands he carried that skin, his own face preserved somehow, held like a mask he could wear whenever he chose. He had cut off his own face and let it rot for a year, then reclaimed it and attached it with leather straps, wearing his own decayed flesh like a grotesque disguise. The police opened fire immediately, but the Joker seemed unconcerned by bullets. He laughed as he moved through the building, leaving behind playing cards and flowers, and evidence of a plan that was already in motion. By the time backup arrived, by the time Batman reached the scene, the Joker was gone, vanished into Gotham's shadows, leaving only a message written in blood on Commissioner Gordon's desk. "The family dies because of you." Batman knew immediately what the message meant. Not Gordon's family, though they would be targets too. No, the Joker was coming after the Bat family. Everyone who wore a mask, everyone who fought beside Batman, everyone who had become part of his mission. The Joker was declaring war not just on Batman, but on everyone Batman cared about. The attacks began that same night, coordinated and precise in a way that suggested the Joker had been planning this for the entire year he was missing. He had been watching, studying, learning everything about each member of the Bat family, and now he was going to use that knowledge to destroy them. Nightwing was attacked at Halley's Circus, the place where Dick Grayson's parents had died, the place that represented both his greatest trauma and his greatest strength. The Joker poisoned the performers, turned Dick's extended circus family against him, forcing Nightwing to fight people he cared about, while they laughed and attacked with Joker toxin in their systems. The message was clear: everything you love can be corrupted, everyone you care about can become a weapon against you. Red Hood found himself in Crime Alley, the place of his death, surrounded by projected images of his murder. The Joker had somehow obtained footage from that terrible night in Ethiopia, and he played it on loop on every surface. Jason Todd watching himself die over and over, hearing the Joker's laugh, reliving the crowbar strikes, the explosion, the moment his world ended. The psychological torture was exquisite in its cruelty, targeting Jason's specific trauma with surgical precision. Red Robin was attacked at Titan's Tower, his sanctuary with his team. The Joker infiltrated the building and left clues suggesting he had killed every Titan, that Tim Drake had failed to protect his friends, that his detective skills were insufficient to save the people he cared about. Tim spent hours finding his teammates, expecting corpses, only to discover they were alive but drugged, that the Joker had simply wanted Tim to experience the horror of believing they were dead. Batgirl returned to her apartment to find the Joker waiting, the same apartment where she had been shot years ago, where her life as Batgirl had ended and her new life as Oracle had begun. The Joker sat in her wheelchair, mocking her disability, reminding her of the night he had paralyzed her, suggesting that he had come to finish what he started. Barbara Gordon, who had overcome so much trauma, who had transformed her tragedy into strength, was forced to face her greatest nightmare return to life. Robin, Damian Wayne, Bruce's biological son, was targeted through his mother. The Joker sent messages suggesting he had captured Talia al Ghul, that he was torturing her, that Damian's mother was suffering because of his association with Batman. For a boy who already struggled with his violent upbringing, who fought daily against the killer instinct his grandfather Ra's al Ghul had instilled in him, the threat to his mother was designed to push him toward darkness. And through it all, each member of the Bat family received the same message. The Joker knew who they were. He knew their real names, their identities beneath the masks, their addresses, their loved ones. He had spent a year learning everything about them, and now he was using that knowledge as a weapon. Batman investigated frantically, trying to stay ahead of the Joker, trying to protect everyone at once. But the clown prince of crime was always one step ahead, always anticipating Batman's moves. And then came the message that made Batman's blood run cold. Alfred Pennyworth was missing. Alfred, who had been with Bruce since childhood, who had supported him through every tragedy, who was more father than butler, more family than any blood relation. Alfred had been taken from Wayne Manor, kidnapped from the very place that should have been safest, from the heart of Batman's world. The Joker left a video message. It showed Alfred bound to a chair in some dark location, his face bruised, his dignified composure cracked but not broken, and standing behind him wearing his rotted face like a mask, was the Joker. "Hello, Batman," the Joker said into the camera, his voice cheerful despite the horror of his appearance. "I have something that belongs to you, or rather, someone, your father. Well, not your real father. He's dead, isn't he? Lying in a grave while his son dresses up like a bat and pretends to be sane. But this father, this Alfred, he's very much alive, for now." The video cut to different angles, showing Alfred from multiple perspectives, suggesting multiple cameras, multiple locations. The Joker had prepared this carefully, had orchestrated every detail to maximize psychological impact. "Here's the fun part," the Joker continued. "I've invited everyone to dinner, the whole family. You, your little birds, everyone who's ever worn a mask and pretended to be your partner. We're going to have a feast. And the main course, well, let's just say I've been preparing something special from dear old Alfred here." The location was revealed through clues in the video: Arkham Asylum. The Joker had somehow taken control of the facility, had turned it into his personal stage for this final performance. And he was waiting there with Alfred, waiting for the Bat family to come rescue their surrogate father, walking willingly into whatever trap the Joker had prepared. Batman knew it was a trap. Everyone knew it was a trap, but they also knew they had no choice. Alfred's life hung in the balance. The Bat family gathered, every member who could make it, every ally who wore a mask, and together they entered Arkham Asylum, walking into the darkness to face the Joker's endgame. The asylum was transformed. Every corridor was decorated with twisted parodies of family celebrations, birthday streamers made from intestines, balloons filled with Joker toxin, presents wrapped in human skin. The Joker had turned the facility into a nightmare version of a family gathering, with inmates dressed as party guests and corpses posed as decorations. They found the dining room in the deepest part of Arkham, a long table set with fine china and silver, lit by candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. And at the head of the table sat the Joker, still wearing his rotted face, looking like death itself, hosting a dinner party. Around the table were chairs, and in each chair sat a member of the Bat family, forced there by fear for Alfred, by the need to see this through. Nightwing, Red Hood, Red Robin, Batgirl, Robin, all present, all accounted for. And at the other end of the table, opposite the Joker, was Batman himself. Between them, in the center of the table, were covered dishes, large silver platters with domes hiding their contents, and beside each platter was a small card with a name written in the Joker's distinctive handwriting, the names of the Bat family members. "Welcome, welcome," the Joker said, spreading his arms wide. "Thank you all for coming to my little celebration. You see, I realized something this past year, something important. Batman has become weak. He's not the Dark Knight anymore. He's just a man surrounded by children playing dress-up, diluting his brand, making him soft and sentimental and so very vulnerable." He stood and walked around the table, trailing his fingers across the covered dishes. "So I decided to help, to remove the problem, to give Batman back his edge by removing all of you from the equation. And I've prepared a very special meal to commemorate the occasion." With theatrical flourish, the Joker removed the first dome. Beneath it was what appeared to be a human face, carved and prepared like some grotesque delicacy, and it looked like Nightwing's face. The second dome revealed another face, Red Hood's this time, or so it seemed. Then Red Robin's, then Batgirl's, then Robin's. Each member of the Bat family stared at what appeared to be their own face, served up on a platter, carved away like the Joker's own face, prepared as the main course for this nightmare dinner. "I've removed what makes you family to him," the Joker explained, his rotted face grinning impossibly wide. "Your faces, your identities, the masks beneath the masks. Now you're no one. Just meat on a plate. Just another victim. Just another joke with a terrible punchline." The horror in the room was palpable. Each member of the Bat family looked at what they believed was their own face, carved away, served as food. The psychological impact was devastating. Even knowing it was likely a trick, even suspecting it wasn't real, the visual horror was overwhelming. But Batman's detective mind was working, analyzing, looking for the flaw in the Joker's presentation. The faces were too perfect, the preservation too clean. They weren't real faces. They couldn't be. They were prosthetics, duplicates, masterful forgeries designed to create maximum horror. "They're fake," Batman said quietly. "You didn't carve anyone's face. This is theater. Psychological torture through suggestion rather than reality." The Joker's smile faltered for just a moment. Then he laughed, a sound that echoed through the asylum like the last gasp of sanity dying. "Does it matter? Real or fake, you felt the horror. You experienced the possibility. That's enough. That's the joke. The uncertainty. The fear that maybe, just maybe, I really did it." Then the lights went out. In the darkness, chaos erupted. The Joker moved through the Bat family like a ghost, attacking, laughing, disappearing before anyone could strike back. They fought blindly, each member trying to protect the others, trying to find Alfred, trying to stop the Joker's plan. When the lights came back on, the Joker was gone. The faces on the platters were revealed as silicone and latex, masterful forgeries but ultimately fake. And in the corner of the room, they found Alfred alive, unconscious but unharmed, his face very much attached. But the Joker had left one more message, carved into the wall above where Alfred lay. "I know who you all are. I've always known. But here's the real joke. I don't care. Knowing your names wouldn't make this fun anymore. Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, all of you beneath the masks, you're just distractions. You're not Batman to me. You're just meat that bleeds and breaks. The only one who matters is the idea of Batman, and I don't need your identities to destroy that." The revelation was perhaps more disturbing than if he had exposed them. The Joker had spent a year learning everything about the Bat family, had discovered all their secrets, all their identities, and he chose not to use that information. He chose not to expose them. Because the game, the eternal dance between Batman and Joker, was more important to him than any victory through revelation. He wanted Batman to know that he knew, wanted the uncertainty, the paranoia, the fear of exposure hanging over them constantly. That was the real torture. Not the attack itself, but the knowledge that the Joker could end them all with a single revelation, and he chose not to, because that would end the game. The Bat family rescued Alfred and escaped Arkham before GCPD arrived, but the damage was done. Trust was broken. Fear had been instilled. Each member questioned whether they should continue, whether their association with Batman put them in too much danger, whether the mission was worth the constant threat of the Joker's attention. In the days that followed, Batman met with each member individually, with Dick, with Tim, with Barbara, with Damian, even with Jason, who had helped despite their differences, and he gave them all the same choice. Leave, walk away. The Joker was right that their connection to him made them targets. He wouldn't blame them for choosing safety over the mission. But one by one, they refused. Dick reminded Bruce that family doesn't abandon family, that they had all chosen this path, knowing the risks. Barbara pointed out that she had survived the Joker before and would survive him again, that fear was not a reason to surrender. Tim argued that the mission was bigger than any one threat, that Gotham needed all of them. Even Jason, in his gruff way, made it clear he wasn't going anywhere. They were family, not by blood, but by choice, and families endure. They survive tragedies. They overcome horrors. They stand together when everything tries to tear them apart. Alfred, recovered from his ordeal, found Bruce in the Batcave one evening, staring at the computer screens showing surveillance of Arkham, searching for any sign of the Joker's next move. "Master Bruce," Alfred said gently, "the Joker wanted to break you by threatening us. He wanted to prove that caring about others made you weak, but he failed to understand the fundamental truth. Your strength comes from us, from knowing you're not alone in this fight, from having people who choose to stand beside you despite the danger. He knows who we are, Bruce replied, his voice heavy with concern. He could reveal everything at any moment, every identity, every secret. He has that power over us. And yet he chooses not to, Alfred observed, because the revelation would end his game. In a twisted way, Master Bruce, the Joker, protects your secrets because he needs you. He needs Batman. And Batman needs the mystery, the symbol, the idea rather than the man. He understands that better than anyone. Bruce was quiet, processing Alfred's words. The Joker's obsession with Batman was both a curse and a strange protection. As long as the game continued, as long as the Clown Prince of Crime found entertainment in their eternal conflict, certain lines wouldn't be crossed. Not out of mercy, but out of self-interest. The Joker needed Batman as much as Batman needed to stop the Joker. It was a sick symbiosis, a relationship built on violence and madness, and the eternal question of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. They would fight forever, or until one of them died, and maybe not even then. Gotham slept uneasily that night, the city sensing somehow that a great horror had been averted, that the Bat family had survived an ordeal designed to destroy them. The Joker was still out there, still planning, still laughing in whatever darkness he called home. But the family had endured. They had faced their worst fears and emerged intact, scarred but unbroken. And Batman, standing watch over his city, knew that the Joker had taught him something valuable despite the horror. That the people who stood beside him, who chose to share his mission, were not weaknesses to be exploited. They were strengths to be cherished. They were the reason he could continue fighting, the reason he could survive each night and face the next. The Joker wanted to prove that family made Batman weak. Instead, he proved the opposite. That family, chosen family, the family you fight beside and bleed with and trust absolutely, was the strongest force in Gotham, stronger than madness. Stronger than fear, stronger than any scheme the Clown Prince of Crime could devise. And that truth, that simple truth, was the one joke the Joker would never understand. Because to understand it, you had to be capable of love. And the Joker, in all his madness, had burned that capacity away long ago, leaving only ashes and laughter and the eternal need for chaos. The Bat family endured, the mission continued. And Gotham had guardians who refused to abandon it, no matter how dark the night became, no matter how terrible the laughter echoing from the shadows. Some bonds cannot be broken, some families cannot be destroyed, and some heroes refuse to surrender, even when monsters try to prove they should. That was the real punchline, and the Joker, for all his genius, never saw it coming. After the horror of death of the family, Gotham experienced a brief period of relative calm. The Joker had vanished again, this time without theatrics or promises of return. The Bat family had regrouped, strengthened their bonds and prepared for whatever came next. But nothing could have prepared them for what the Joker had planned. Because this time the Clown Prince of Crime wasn't interested in games or psychological torture or elaborate schemes with twisted punchlines. This time, he wanted to end everything. The final joke. The ultimate punchline. The endgame. It began with the Justice League. Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, heroes who stood alongside Batman as protectors of not just Gotham but the entire world. They arrived at the Batcave one evening, responding to Batman's call for a strategy meeting. But something was wrong. Their movements were slightly off. Their eyes held a disturbing gleam, and their smiles were too wide, too fixed, too familiar. They were infected with Joker toxin. The toxin wasn't the normal version that caused uncontrollable laughter, followed by death. This was something new, something the Joker had engineered specifically for the Justice League. It maintained their powers, their intelligence, their abilities, but it twisted their thinking, turned their heroism into violent enthusiasm, their desire to protect into a compulsion to destroy. Superman moved with his characteristic speed, but now he was laughing as he attacked Batman. Wonder Woman's lasso glowed with truth as always, but the truths she spoke were distorted, corrupted versions of reality. The Flash vibrated through walls, leaving trails of Joker venom in his wake. The heroes had become weapons, puppets of the Joker's will, turned against the one person who might stop his final plan. Batman barely escaped. He used every contingency plan he had developed for exactly this scenario. Every failsafe designed for the moment when heroes became threats. Kryptonite for Superman, psychological redirection for Wonder Woman, speed traps for Flash. He fought his own friends, his allies, the people he trusted most, and he won, temporarily, buying himself time to find a cure to stop the Joker before the infection spread further. But the Justice League was just the beginning. While Batman was dealing with his infected allies, the Joker had already executed the next phase of his plan. Gotham's water supply had been poisoned, not with a toxin that would kill immediately, but with a substance that would spread slowly, building up in the population over days and weeks until it reached critical mass. Batman analyzed samples from the reservoir and felt his blood run cold. The Joker had created a super toxin using a substance called Dionysium, a chemical compound discovered in the caves deep beneath Gotham. Dionysium was ancient, possibly as old as human civilization itself, a regenerative substance that could heal wounds, extend life, even resurrect the dead. But in the Joker's hands, it had been weaponized into something horrifying. The toxin in the water would turn Gotham's entire population into versions of the Joker, not physically transformed, but mentally corrupted. They would laugh at tragedy. They would find joy in suffering. They would embrace chaos as philosophy and murder as art. An entire city of Jokers, millions of people infected with the madness that defined the clown prince of crime. Batman's investigation into Dionysium led him down rabbit holes he never expected to find. Historical records showed strange references to a laughing figure throughout Gotham's history. A man resembling the Joker had been photographed in the 1890s at a Gotham social function. Similar figures appeared in records from the 1920s, the 1940s, even earlier, always present during periods of chaos, always smiling that impossible smile. The implication was staggering. The Joker might not be one man. He might be a force, a concept, something that had existed in Gotham for over a century, using Dionysium to regenerate, to survive, to persist through generations as an eternal avatar of chaos. Batman tracked the source of the Dionysium to the same cave system where the Court of Owls had hidden their talons, the same underground network that crisscrossed beneath Gotham like veins beneath skin. And deep in those caves, in a chamber that seemed older than the city itself, he found evidence that the Joker had been using Dionysium for decades, perhaps centuries, to cheat death, to return from injuries that should have killed him. The Joker's immortality explained so much: his impossible survival rate, his ability to bounce back from encounters that should have been fatal, his presence in Gotham stretching back through history. He was a cancer that had infected the city at its foundation, a disease that regenerated faster than it could be cut out. But Batman also discovered something else in those caves. Aboriginal paintings on the walls, images left by the indigenous people who had lived in the area before European settlement. The paintings showed a pale figure with a stretched smile, depicted as a trickster spirit, a demon of chaos that the original inhabitants had tried to seal away in the caves. The Joker wasn't just using ancient chemicals. He might be an ancient entity himself, or a human who had discovered and been transformed by forces older than Gotham, older than civilization. The scope of the threat became clear. This wasn't just another Joker scheme. This was his endgame, the culmination of everything he had learned, everything he had planned, possibly everything he had worked toward for over a century. He would transform Gotham into a city of chaos, prove his philosophy that anyone could be like him, given the right push, create a legacy that would outlive even his immortal existence. Batman worked tirelessly to develop a cure for the toxin, but the Joker had anticipated this, had engineered the compound to be resistant to standard antidotes. Every attempt Batman made was countered by some aspect of the toxin's design. It was as if the Joker had spent years studying Batman's methods, predicting his responses, creating a poison that was custom designed to be unsolvable. Meanwhile, the infection was spreading. Batman could see it in the eyes of Gotham's citizens. Random acts of violence accompanied by laughter, cruel jokes played on strangers, a gradual breakdown of empathy and moral restraint. The toxin was changing people slowly, turning them into versions of the Joker one laugh at a time. The Bat family tried to help, but even they weren't immune. Tim Drake was exposed while investigating a crime scene. Barbara Gordon detected traces of the toxin in her blood during a routine medical scan. Even Alfred showed signs of infection, his typically reserved demeanor cracking to reveal inappropriate laughter at dark moments. Batman found himself increasingly isolated, racing against time to save a city that was turning into his worst nightmare. The trail led Batman back to Ace Chemicals, the site of the Joker's transformation, the place where the Red Hood had fallen into chemicals and emerged as the Clown Prince of Crime. The Joker had chosen this location for their final confrontation, a symbolic return to the birthplace of their eternal conflict. Batman arrived to find the entire facility transformed into a carnival of death. The Joker had gathered followers, people who had already succumbed completely to the toxin, who now worshipped him as a prophet of chaos. They filled the chemical plant, laughing and celebrating, waiting for their master to spread his gospel to all of Gotham. And in the center of it all, standing on a catwalk above the same vat of chemicals that had created him, was the Joker himself. He looked different somehow, older perhaps, or maybe just tired, as if maintaining the persona of chaos for so long had finally taken its toll, even on someone sustained by Dionysium's regenerative properties. "Batman," the Joker said, his voice carrying across the plant, "welcome to the end, the final performance, the last laugh. I've been working toward this for so long, longer than you know, longer than you could possibly imagine." "How long?" Batman asked, moving closer, analyzing the situation, looking for weaknesses. "How long have you been doing this? How many times have you died and come back?" The Joker smiled, but it was different from his usual manic grin. This smile carried weight, history, the weariness of someone who had lived too long and seen too much. "Does it matter? A century? 2? Time loses meaning when you can't die. When every day is just another opportunity for chaos, another chance to prove that the universe is one big cosmic joke. I've been the Joker so long, I don't remember being anything else. Maybe I never was anything else. Maybe this is all I ever was, all I was meant to be." "You were human once," Batman said. "You had a life before the chemicals, before the madness. You made a choice to become this." "Did I?" The Joker laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Or did the choice make me? Did the chemicals reveal what was always inside? Or did they create something new? I don't know anymore, Batman, and that's the beauty of it. That's the ultimate joke. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I came from. I don't even know if any of my origin stories are true, or if they're all just different versions of the same lie. And neither do you." He spread his arms wide, gesturing to the vat below. "But I know how it ends. It ends here, where it began. In these chemicals, with you and me, the eternal opponents. The Dark Knight and the Clown Prince, order and chaos, sanity and madness. We end together, Batman, we fall together. And Gotham becomes the masterpiece I always knew it could be, a city of jokers. A monument to the fact that everyone, given the right push, becomes me." Batman analyzed the Joker's words, his positioning, the layout of the facility. There had to be a way to stop this, to cure the toxin, to save Gotham without losing himself in the process. But every option seemed to lead to the same place. To stop the Joker permanently, to end his regeneration, to ensure he could never poison Gotham again, Batman would have to ensure the Joker died in a way that even Dionysium couldn't heal. He would have to kill the Joker, not in a moment of rage or accident, but deliberately with full knowledge and intent. He would have to cross the line he had spent his entire career defending, break the rule that defined him as a hero rather than a vigilante. "You've engineered this perfectly," Batman said, understanding the trap. "You've created a scenario where the only way to save Gotham is for me to kill you. You want me to break my code, to prove that I'm no different from you, that everyone becomes a monster when pushed far enough." "Not everyone," the Joker corrected. "Just you, just the great Batman, brought down to my level, forced to admit that sometimes killing is the answer, that your moral code is just another joke, another pretense that crumbles when reality demands action. Kill me, save Gotham. Maintain your code, let the city fall. Either way, I win. Either way, the joke's on you." The fight that erupted was unlike any they had before. Batman and the Joker, fighting not just physically but philosophically, each blow carrying the weight of their eternal conflict. They crashed through the chemical plant, past vats of toxins and pools of Dionysium, their battle a dance they had performed countless times but had never completed. The Joker fought with unexpected skill, with techniques that suggested training beyond what any normal criminal should possess. He matched Batman move for move, strategy for strategy, as if they were two sides of the same coin, forever balanced, forever opposed. "We're the same, you and I," the Joker said as they fought. "We both fell into darkness and emerged transformed. You became order, I became chaos. You fight to save, I fight to destroy. But we're both prisoners of that one moment, that one choice, that one fall that defined everything that came after." "We're nothing alike," Batman growled, landing a punch that should have dropped a normal person but only made the Joker laugh. "Aren't we? We both can't stop, won't stop. The city burns around us, and we keep fighting because it's all we know how to do. I need you to try to stop me. You need me to give your mission meaning. Without me, you're just a rich man in a costume beating up poor people. Without you, I'm just a killer with a sense of humor. We complete each other, Batman. We're the eternal question and the eternal answer, and neither of us can exist without the other." The battle moved to the catwalk above the main chemical vat, the same vat that had supposedly created the Joker decades ago. They fought on the narrow walkway, inches from a fall that could kill even Batman, that could end even the Joker's regeneration if the chemicals destroyed him completely. And in the chaos of combat, the Joker made his move. He grabbed Batman, locked him in a hold that neither could escape from, and tipped them both over the edge. They fell together, just as the Joker had promised, fell toward the churning chemicals below, locked in an embrace that was equal parts combat and connection, hate and understanding. Two forces that had defined each other, falling toward an end that neither could prevent. In those final seconds before impact, time seemed to slow. Batman saw his life flash before his eyes. Not just his life as Batman, but his life as Bruce Wayne. His parents, Alfred, Dick, Jason, Tim, Damian, Barbara. Everyone he had loved, everyone he had saved, everyone he had failed. The weight of every choice, every sacrifice, every night spent fighting a war that could never truly be won. And he saw the Joker's life too, reflected in those mad eyes. Not the details, not the specifics, but the essence, the loneliness, the desperation to be understood, the need to prove that the world was as broken as he was. The tragedy of a man, or a thing, or a force, that could only connect through violence, that could only express love through hate, that could only find meaning in meaninglessness. They hit the chemicals together. The impact drove them deep into the vat, into the same substance that had created the Joker, and now would unmake them both. Batman felt the chemicals burning through his suit, eating away at his flesh, destroying him on a molecular level. And beside him, the Joker was dissolving too, his regeneration overwhelmed by the sheer corrosive power of the vat. The Joker's last words, bubbling up through chemical foam, were barely audible. "Thank you, Batman, for the dance, for the fight, for being everything I needed you to be. You were the best partner a clown could ask for, the best audience, the best enemy, the best friend." And then there was only chemicals, only dissolution, only the end of two forces that had defined Gotham for so long that the city barely remembered what it was like without them. The Bat family, working desperately with Oracle's coordination, managed to synthesize a cure using Batman's notes and samples he had collected. They dispersed it through the atmosphere, neutralizing the toxin before it could transform Gotham completely. The city was saved, pulled back from the brink of becoming a monument to chaos. But Batman was gone, lost in the chemicals, dissolved along with his greatest enemy. The cave was empty. The costume hung unused. The symbol that had protected Gotham for so long was suddenly terrifyingly absent. Except Batman had survived. Somehow, through will or luck or the residual Dionysium in the chemicals, he had survived. His body was found days later, washed up on the shore of the Gotham River, barely alive, his memories gone, his identity erased. Bruce Wayne existed, but he didn't remember being Batman. He didn't remember the mission, the tragedy, the eternal war against crime. He was just a man, living a normal life, free from the burden of the cowl. He dated Julie Madison, a woman from his past. He smiled without the weight of Gotham's darkness on his shoulders. He experienced something he hadn't felt since that night in Crime Alley when his parents died. Peace. The Bat family faced an impossible choice. Let Bruce live in peace, ignorant of his past, free from the mission that had consumed him, or restore his memories, bring back Batman, and condemn him to the eternal war once again. Alfred stood in Bruce's apartment one evening, holding a serum that could restore everything. All the memories, all the skills, all the burden of being Batman. He watched Bruce laugh at something on television, saw genuine happiness in eyes that had been dark for so long, and Alfred's hand trembled with the weight of the choice. "Master Bruce seems content," Alfred said to Dick Grayson, who had accompanied him. "Perhaps it's cruel to take that from him, to burden him again with everything he's finally free from." "But Gotham needs Batman," Dick replied, though his voice carried doubt. "The city is falling apart without him. Crime is rising. People are scared. We need him back." They stood there, watching Bruce Wayne live a life he had been denied since childhood. A life without trauma, without responsibility, without the eternal mission to save a city that might not be savable. And they had to decide whether mercy meant letting him keep that peace, or whether duty demanded they take it away. In the end, the choice was made by Gotham itself. A new threat emerged, something so terrible that only Batman could stop it. The Bat family tried, fought with everything they had, but it wasn't enough. And Bruce, watching news coverage of the attack, seeing his friends in danger, seeing Gotham burning, felt something stir in his subconscious. Muscle memory, training buried so deep it survived even memory loss. The instinct to protect, to fight, to stand against darkness. Bruce Wayne found himself at the site of the attack, moving with purpose he didn't understand, fighting with skills he didn't remember learning. And in that moment of crisis, in that crucible of violence and necessity, Batman returned. Not through Alfred's serum, but through Bruce's own choice, his own recognition that peace was a luxury he couldn't afford while Gotham suffered. The memories came flooding back, all of them, the good and the terrible, the victories and the failures, the decades of war against crime, and Bruce Wayne donned the cowl once more, returning to the mission that defined him, accepting the burden he could never truly set down. Batman was reborn, not through chemicals or chance, but through choice. The choice to sacrifice personal happiness for the greater good, the choice to carry the weight of Gotham's darkness so others wouldn't have to, the choice to be the symbol, the legend, the Dark Knight that the city needed even when it didn't deserve him. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife or oblivion awaited those who dissolved in chemicals, perhaps the Joker was laughing, because his final joke had come true after all. Batman could escape death, could survive dissolution, could even find peace, but he could never escape being Batman. The mission was eternal, the war was endless, and the Dark Knight would fight until there was nothing left to give. That was the ultimate punchline. Not that Batman and Joker were the same, but that they were both prisoners of Gotham, bound to their roles, unable to break free even when given the chance. The city owned them both, demanded their service, consumed their lives in exchange for the eternal promise of one more night, one more fight, one more chance to make a difference in the darkness. Gotham had its Dark Knight back, and Batman, standing on a rooftop watching over his city, knew that he would fight until the end, whatever that end might be, because that's what symbols do. They endure, they persist, they refuse to die even when death would be merciful. The Joker was gone, dissolved in chemicals, his regeneration finally overcome, but his philosophy remained, his question unanswered, his challenge to Batman's worldview still echoing through Gotham's streets, and Batman carried that weight, along with all the others, because someone had to. Someone always had to stand in the darkness and refuse to let the monsters win. Even when those monsters were inside us all, waiting for the right push to emerge. Even when the line between hero and villain was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. Even when the cost of fighting was everything you had and more. Batman endured, Gotham endured, and the eternal war continued, night after night, until the city finally found peace, or the Dark Knight finally found rest. Whichever came first, Batman stood on the highest tower in Gotham, the wind pulling at his cape, the city spreading below him like a living organism of light and shadow. Years had passed since his return from the chemical vat, Years filled with battles and investigations and endless nights of vigilance. And in those years, he had begun to see patterns he had never noticed before, connections that suggested something deeper, something fundamental about Gotham itself. Every case he had faced, every villain he had fought, they all shared something, a connection to Gotham's darkness that went beyond simple criminal motivation. The Joker, born from chemicals in a plant built on Gotham's soil, Two-Face, created in a Gotham courtroom, Bane, drawn to Gotham specifically to break its protector, the Court of Owls, literally built into Gotham's architecture. Even his own origin, his parents murdered in a Gotham alley, creating the need for Batman. It was as if the city itself was generating these conflicts, creating villains and heroes in equal measure, feeding on the eternal struggle between light and darkness. And Batman, with his detective's mind, began to wonder if this was not coincidence but design. If Gotham was not just a city but something more, something aware, something that required the conflict to survive. His investigation into this theory led him back to the caves beneath Gotham, the same caves where the Court of Owls had hidden their talons, where Dionysium flowed in underground pools, where Aboriginal paintings depicted demons and tricksters and battles between light and shadow that predated the city by thousands of years. And there in the deepest chamber, he found evidence that shook everything he thought he knew about his mission, his city, his entire existence as Batman. Gotham was built on a gateway, not metaphorically, but literally. The indigenous people who had inhabited this land before European settlement had known about it, had performed rituals to keep it sealed, had warned in their stories about what would happen if the barrier ever weakened. They spoke of the dark multiverse, a realm of nightmares and failed realities that existed beneath the positive universe, like a shadow beneath light. The gateway beneath Gotham leaked energy from that dark realm. It had been leaking for centuries, possibly millennia, and that energy corrupted everything it touched. It drove people to madness. It amplified negative emotions. It created an environment where evil flourished and hope struggled to survive. Gotham wasn't just a corrupt city, it was a poisoned city, infected at its foundation by forces from beyond reality. But the gateway served a purpose. It needed a guardian, someone to stand watch, to prevent it from opening fully, to fight against the darkness that constantly pushed to break through. And throughout history, Gotham had created those guardians. Warriors, knights, protectors who stood against the tide of darkness, who embodied the light that kept the shadow at bay. Batman was the latest in a long line of guardians, but he was also something more. His parents' murder had not been random. It had been orchestrated by the dark energy itself, creating the trauma necessary to forge a guardian strong enough to face what was coming. Bruce Wayne's choice to become Batman had not been free will. It had been the inevitable response to a situation designed specifically to create him. The revelation was devastating. Everything Batman had believed about himself, about his mission, about his choices, was revealed as manipulation. He was not a self-made hero. He was a product of Gotham's darkness, created by the very force he fought against, shaped into a weapon to defend a gateway he never knew existed. But the implications went further. If Batman was created by the gateway, then so were his villains. The Joker was not just a man driven mad by chemicals, he was an avatar of chaos, a manifestation of the dark multiverse's desire to break through, given form and purpose by the same force that created Batman. Every villain Batman fought was a champion of darkness, trying to overwhelm the Guardian, trying to open the gateway, and let the nightmare realm consume Gotham and eventually the world. The eternal conflict between Batman and his rogues gallery was not personal, it was cosmic, a war between light and darkness that had been fought since before Gotham existed, that would continue until either the gateway was permanently sealed, or the dark multiverse finally broke through. Batman processed this information with the analytical detachment that had served him throughout his career. But beneath that detachment, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel: despair. Because if his existence was predetermined, if his choices were illusions created by forces beyond his control, then what was the point? What meaning did his mission have if he was just a puppet dancing on strings pulled by cosmic entities? He thought about leaving, about walking away from Gotham, from Batman, from the eternal war that was apparently scripted from the beginning. Let someone else be the Guardian. Let the gateway find another champion. He had sacrificed enough, lost enough, suffered enough for a mission that was never truly his choice. But as he stood on that tower, looking over Gotham, he realized something. It didn't matter whether his parents' murder was orchestrated or random, whether his choice to become Batman was free will or cosmic manipulation, the result was the same. People needed help. The city needed protection. Children needed someone to stand between them and the monsters. The why of his creation was less important than the what of his actions. Batman had saved lives. He had stopped killers. He had given hope to a city that desperately needed it. Whether he was created by cosmic forces or personal choice, those lives saved were real. That hope was real. The difference he made was real. And more than that, Batman understood that the distinction between cosmic destiny and personal choice was false. Even if the dark energy had created the circumstances of his parents' murder, Bruce Wayne had still chosen how to respond. He could have become a villain, could have let rage and trauma twist him into something dark. The Gateway would have been just as satisfied with a champion of darkness as with a champion of light. But Bruce had chosen differently, not because fate demanded it, but because Alfred had guided him, because his parents had instilled values that survived their death, because somewhere in his heart, Bruce Wayne wanted to ensure no other child suffered as he had suffered. That choice, that decision to be a hero rather than a monster, was his own. No cosmic force could take that from him. The same was true for the Bat family. Dick Grayson had suffered tragedy, had been marked by the Court of Owls, had faced darkness that could have consumed him. But he chose to be Nightwing, chose to honor his parents by saving others, chose light over darkness. Barbara Gordon had been paralyzed, had every reason to surrender to bitterness and despair, but she chose to become Oracle, to continue fighting in a new way. Even Jason Todd, twisted by the Lazarus Pit, corrupted by rage, still chose to protect people in his own way, still operated by a moral code even if it differed from Batman's. They were all products of Gotham's darkness, but they were also more than that. They were individuals who made choices, who fought not because cosmic forces demanded it, but because they believed in something worth fighting for. They were proof that even in a city poisoned by dark energy, even in a world where fate seemed to script every tragedy, human will still mattered, choice still mattered, hope still mattered. Batman returned to the Batcave and gathered the family. Dick, Barbara, Tim, Damian, even Jason answered the call. Alfred prepared tea because some rituals transcended cosmic revelations and supernatural threats, and Batman told them everything, about the Gateway, about the dark multiverse, about the possibility that their entire existence was orchestrated by forces beyond their understanding. They absorbed the information with varying reactions. Tim's analytical mind immediately began theorizing implications. Damian's warrior pride bristled at the suggestion he was anything but self-made. Barbara's strategic thinking focused on what this meant for future threats. Jason laughed bitterly at the confirmation that Gotham was literally cursed. And Dick, ever the optimist, simply shrugged. "So we're cosmically destined to fight darkness," Dick said, sipping his tea as casually as if they were discussing the weather. "How is that different from what we've been doing all along? We knew Gotham was special, knew it had a darkness that went beyond normal crime. Now we know why. Doesn't change what we do about it. It changes everything," Jason argued. "If we're just puppets, if our choices aren't real, if we're programmed by some dark realm to fight forever, then what's the point? We're not heroes. We're just weapons created by the same darkness we fight." "No," Barbara interjected, her voice firm with certainty earned through her own trials. "We're people who faced darkness and chose how to respond. The Gateway might have created circumstances, but it didn't make our choices. I chose to be Batgirl. I chose to become Oracle after the Joker shot me. Those were my decisions, made by me, regardless of what cosmic forces wanted." Alfred, standing quietly in the background as he always did, added his perspective. "Master Bruce, the circumstances of your parents' death do not diminish the love they had for you, nor the values they instilled. Whether their murder was random or orchestrated, you honored them by becoming a force for good. That honor, that choice, belongs to you alone." Batman looked at the people gathered in his cave, the family he had built from tragedy and determination, and he understood the final truth. The Gateway had created circumstances. It had shaped events, but it could not create compassion. It could not manufacture the bonds between people who chose to stand together. It could not script the moments of genuine connection, of love, of sacrifice that defined the Bat family. The darkness could create pain, but it could not dictate how people responded to that pain. It could forge weapons, but it could not control whether those weapons were used for destruction or protection. The cosmic forces that shaped Gotham could create heroes and villains, but they could not determine which was which. That distinction came from choices made by individuals, by people who decided what they believed in and what they were willing to fight for. "We continue," Batman said finally. "We fight not because fate demands it, but because it's right, because people need help, because Gotham, for all its darkness, is worth saving. The gateway exists. The dark multiverse pushes against our reality, but our response to that threat is ours. We choose to be heroes. Every night, with every action, we make that choice again, and no cosmic force can take that from us." The Bat family nodded in agreement. They had faced this revelation and emerged stronger, more united, more certain of their purpose. They were not puppets of destiny. They were people who looked at darkness and chose to be light, who faced inevitability and decided to fight anyway, who understood that meaning was not given by cosmic forces, but created through actions and choices, and the stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. In the days that followed, Batman reinforced the seals on the gateway. He worked with magical experts, with scientists, with anyone who might help strengthen the barrier between Gotham and the dark multiverse. He could not eliminate the threat entirely, but he could contain it, could ensure that the darkness leaked slowly rather than flooding through, could buy time for Gotham to heal, to grow, to become something more than a battleground between cosmic forces. And he understood now why Gotham could never be fully saved, never completely cleaned of crime and corruption, because the gateway would always leak darkness, would always create circumstances that generated conflict. But that didn't make the fight meaningless. It made it necessary. Someone had to stand against that darkness, had to be the barrier between Gotham's citizens and the nightmare realm that pushed against reality. Batman was that barrier. The Bat family was that barrier. They were Gotham's immune system, fighting an infection that could never be fully cured but could be managed, contained, prevented from overwhelming the host. And in that understanding, Batman found a strange peace. He was not fighting a war he could win. He was fighting a war that needed to be fought, that required constant vigilance, that would continue as long as Gotham stood. Some nights later, Batman stood once again on that high tower, looking over his city. The lights below flickered like stars, each one representing lives lived, dreams pursued, hope maintained despite everything Gotham threw at its citizens. And Batman understood that those lights were what he fought for. Not cosmic balance, not predetermined destiny, but the simple human desire for those lights to keep burning, for those lives to continue, for hope to survive one more night. Alfred joined him on the rooftop. A rare occurrence, but one that suggested the butler understood this moment, needed witnesses, needed someone to share the weight of revelation and acceptance. "You've made your peace with it then," Alfred observed, "with knowing that your mission is both choice and destiny, free will and cosmic design, personal and universal." "I've accepted that the distinction doesn't matter as much as I thought," Batman replied. "What matters is that tonight people sleep safely because we stand watch. Tomorrow they'll wake up and face their own challenges, make their own choices, live their own lives, and we'll be here to ensure they get that chance. Whether that's fate or choice, it's still worth doing." "Your parents would be proud," Alfred said quietly. "They raised a boy who would look at cosmic darkness and choose to fight it, who would learn that his entire existence might be manipulated and decide that his response was still his own. They would be very proud indeed." Batman was quiet, letting the words settle, letting himself feel the weight of them. Thomas and Martha Wayne had died in Crime Alley, possibly murdered by forces beyond human understanding, their deaths orchestrated to create the trauma necessary to forge a guardian. But they had also lived, had loved their son, had instilled values and compassion, and a sense of justice that survived their death, and flourished into something that protected an entire city. Their legacy was not the trauma. It was Bruce's response to that trauma. It was Batman, standing watch over Gotham, refusing to let darkness win. It was the Bat family, a collection of broken people who chose to use their pain to help others. It was every life saved, every crime stopped, every night that ended with fewer victims than it began. "Thank you, Alfred," Batman said, "for everything, for staying when you could have left, for guiding me when I could have become something dark, for being the family I needed when I had lost everything else. None of this works without you." "Nonsense, Master Bruce," Alfred replied, though his voice carried emotion that betrayed his words. "You would have found your way regardless. I simply ensured you had a proper cup of tea along the journey." They stood together in companionable silence, watching over Gotham as the night deepened. Somewhere below, Commissioner Gordon was coordinating his officers, working to keep the peace through official channels. In the streets, ordinary citizens were going about their lives, unaware of cosmic gateways and dark multiverses, simply trying to survive and thrive in a difficult city. And in the shadows, other protectors moved, each member of the Bat family patrolling their sectors, standing their watches, being the symbols that Gotham needed. The city breathed beneath them, alive and struggling and surviving despite everything. Crime would continue, villains would emerge, the darkness would never fully recede, but neither would the light, neither would the determination of people who chose to fight for something better, who refused to accept that Gotham was beyond saving, who woke up each morning and decided that today they would make a difference, however small. Batman understood now that his war would never end, but he also understood that wars were not measured by their endings but by their battles, by the ground defended, by the lives protected along the way. Victory was not defeating all crime. Victory was ensuring that one more child did not lose their parents in an alley, one more family made it home safely, one more person found hope in the darkness. And those victories, those small everyday triumphs, were worth the eternal vigilance, were worth the sacrifice, the pain, the burden of wearing the cowl, were worth standing between Gotham and the abyss, knowing that the abyss would push back, would test him, would try to break him as it had broken so many before. But Batman would not break, because he was more than the trauma that created him, more than the cosmic forces that shaped his existence, more than the symbol or the legend or the Dark Knight. He was Bruce Wayne, a man who looked at his greatest tragedy and decided it would not define him, would not break him, would not stop him from making the world better. He was Batman, and he would endure. The night was calm, a rare gift in Gotham. Batman savored it, knowing it wouldn't last, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new tests. But tonight, Gotham was at peace. The citizens slept safely. The Bat family stood watch. And high above the city, Batman and Alfred looked over their domain with the quiet satisfaction of shepherds who had guided their flock through another night. "Shall we return to the cave, Master Bruce?" Alfred asked eventually. "I believe there are casework files requiring your attention, and you've been standing in the wind for quite some time." "In a moment," Batman replied. "I just want to remember this, the city at peace, the family safe, the understanding that what we do matters, regardless of why we do it. I want to hold this moment, carry it with me through the battles to come." "Very well, sir," Alfred said, understanding as he always did. "I shall prepare some hot chocolate for when you return, and perhaps some of those cookies Master Dick enjoys. It seems a night for small comforts, for remembering that we are human beneath the masks, that we fight not as cosmic warriors, but as people who care deeply for other people." Batman nodded, and Alfred departed, leaving him alone with Gotham in the night. The city stretched endlessly, a living puzzle of light and shadow, hope and despair, constantly changing yet fundamentally the same. It was beautiful in its way, this wounded city, this battleground, this place that demanded everything and gave so little in return. But it was his city, his responsibility, his home, and he would protect it, not because fate demanded it, but because he chose to. Because somewhere in the darkness below, a child was sleeping safely who might not have without Batman's intervention. Because somewhere a family was whole who might have been shattered. Because somewhere someone looked at the bat signal in the sky and felt hope instead of fear. That was enough. That had to be enough. And Batman, standing watch over Gotham as he had for so many years and would for many more, decided that it was. The eternal war continued. The darkness pushed against the light. The gateway leaked corruption into Gotham's foundations. But Batman stood firm, a barrier between the city and the abyss, a symbol of hope in a place that desperately needed symbols, a reminder that even in the darkest night, there was always someone watching, always someone fighting, always someone who refused to let the monsters win. Some heroes saved the world. Batman saved Gotham one night at a time, one person at a time, one choice at a time, and in that endless, eternal, impossible task, he found his purpose, his meaning, his peace. The night was calm. Gotham was safe. Batman stood watch. And tomorrow he would do it all again. Because that's what heroes do. They stand in the darkness and refuse to fall. They face impossible odds and fight anyway. They carry burdens that would crush ordinary people, and somehow find the strength to continue. They endure. Batman endured. Gotham endured. And the eternal dance between light and shadow continued, as it always had, as it always would, in a city that was cursed and blessed in equal measure, that created monsters and heroes with equal abandon, that stood as a testament to humanity's capacity for both evil and good, for both despair and hope. The Dark Knight watched over his city, cape billowing in the wind, a symbol standing against the darkness. And Gotham, for tonight at least, rested peacefully beneath his protection, dreaming of better tomorrows while Batman ensured they would live to see them. The mission continued, the watch was kept, the symbol endured, as it always would, until either Gotham found lasting peace, or Batman had nothing left to give. And knowing Batman, knowing Gotham, that moment was still very, very far away. The city breathed, Batman stood watch, and all for now was well in the eternal night that was Gotham City. Sleep well, Gotham. Sleep well, dreamers. The Dark Knight keeps his vigil while you rest, standing between you and the darkness, ensuring that you wake to see another dawn. And when the bat signal shines again, when danger threatens, when the night grows too dark and the monsters too bold, he will be there, always there, forever vigilant, forever protecting. Forever Batman. The end and the beginning. Because in Gotham, every ending is just another beginning. Every night survived as preparation for the next. Every victory is temporary, but that doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it necessary. And Batman, standing watch over his city, understood that better than anyone. Good night, Gotham. Good night, Dark Knight. Until the signal shines again.